Chapter 1, Please Leave Late at Night, inside a luxurious villa. Aurora Gable knelt helplessly on the floor, her gaze lost as she looked at the man before her. "Ethan," she asked, "do you really not want me anymore?" Ethan Smith glanced coldly at the woman kneeling by his feet. There was no denying she was a rare beauty, but it was useless. No matter how beautiful, she was nothing more than an item he had bought with money. Deep down, Ethan had never respected her. "This is the last time. Serve me well, and I'll make sure you're compensated." With that, Ethan lifted Aurora into his arms and placed her on the bed. A faint, sweet scent drifted into his nostrils. He unconsciously half-closed his eyes. The woman's scent always made him lose control. As always, Aurora obediently submitted. Ethan looked with satisfaction at the blush on her face. No matter how many times they had done this, she never seemed to lose that air of innocence. And that was a poison that could drive a man wild. But it was all an act, he thought. An act packaged for money. Today, she could be innocent and naive for him, Ethan Smith. Tomorrow, she could be coquettish and charming for another man. A strange fire of jealousy surged within him. His movements suddenly became frenzied. Ethan ripped open the woman's blouse. The expensive, bright red top was torn beyond repair. A flicker of fear and nervousness rose in Aurora's eyes. But to Ethan, that timid gaze only fueled his impatient desire. Her brow, her tightly shut eyes, her long, fair neck, the softness of her chest. Her body was pristine and smooth, and his kisses were a dense, fine rain, devouring, tearing. Ethan's kisses were fierce and intense. Aurora's whole body grew hot and red from his kisses. She struggled to look at him and pleaded, "Ethan, please don't leave me. I can stay by your side, I don't need anything." Her eyes were wet as she spoke. She didn't need a title, she only begged to stay with him. Ethan's gaze turned icy. He abruptly stood up and looked down at her coldly. Under his stare, Aurora felt as if she were sitting on pins and needles. "I'm getting married," Ethan said flatly. Aurora's eyes reddened. "I know, it was all over the papers." "Heh," it said. Ethan Smith, the CEO of Nanteng Group, announced the wedding date is set. Ethan shot her a disdainful look. "I didn't realize you read the news." Aurora sniffled, her voice full of grievance. "Before I was with you, I was a student at T University. Why wouldn't I read the news?" Chapter 2. The first meeting, Ethan let out a contemptuous laugh, a sound that once again wounded Aurora's fragile pride. "So what if you were a T University student? You still willingly lie here to be toyed with for money, but you were smart about it. $100,000 a month was more than enough." Aurora's voice was bitter. "Do you have to say that? Do you have to hurt me like this? Or do you just need to remind me of the nature of our relationship?" Ethan stared at Aurora's pale face and her clear, moist eyes, which were clouded with a misty haze, sadistically savoring her pain. He couldn't deny a certain reluctance to let her go, but it wasn't enough to convince himself to marry a woman who would willingly sell her body for money. Ethan pulled Aurora's soft, captivating body close again. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. This would probably be the last time. The last time she would feel his warmth and smell his scent in his embrace. She was filled with sorrow and reluctance. A year ago, her father had passed away. A grief-stricken Aurora had returned from college only to be told by her stepmother, Martha, that her stepsister, Scarlett Gable, had leukemia and needed chemotherapy. Martha said the treatments would cost tens of thousands of dollars every month. Her father had been a civil servant, and her stepmother didn't work. While their expenses weren't huge, they were by no means a wealthy family. Although Scarlett was spoiled and had bullied Aurora endlessly since childhood, she was still her sister, the only family she had left in the world. Aurora's heart softened. She couldn't just watch her die. In a moment of resolve, Aurora dropped out of college and decided to support the family. As an art student at T University, she set up a stall on the street after leaving school, drawing portraits for passers-by for $10 a sketch. But customers were few and far between, making it impossible to raise the huge sum needed for the treatments. Desperate, Aurora followed her stepmother's advice and took a job as a waitress at a bar owned by Martha's brother. "It'll be fine. It's a family place, so it's safe. For your sister's life, you'll have to endure this, Aurora," her stepmother had said. Aurora arrived at the bar, her heart pounding with fear. The moment she put on the uniform, she knew something was wrong. The dress was too revealing, exposing a large patch of her fair skin. What man wouldn't get ideas looking at that? As she hesitated, wondering if she should stay, the manager had already assigned her a client. Then, Aurora was led into a VIP room. It was there that she met Ethan Smith for the first time. Chapter 3. Just look at me occasionally. At that time, Ethan had not yet inherited the Nanteng group. He was just the heir who had recently returned from abroad. So, Aurora didn't recognize him. But with just one glance, she was deeply captivated. He was the most handsome man she had ever seen. Just sitting there quietly, a faint, indifferent smile on his lips, was enough to become the most beautiful scene she had ever wanted to paint. But before Aurora could even process the yearning in her heart, a burly man sitting next to Ethan pulled her onto his lap. Aurora fell onto the man in a panic. Seeing her innocent, blushing face, the man's hands began to wander, trying to undress her. "Ah!" Aurora cried out, struggling desperately. She looked toward the door for help, but the female manager in charge was nonchalantly flattering another man with a lewd smile, completely ignoring Aurora's plight. In despair, Aurora realized she was trapped. At that moment, she deeply regretted coming here. She had a premonition that she would not escape this night with her innocence intact. Just as she was utterly hopeless, a long, slender hand reached out and gently pulled her slight frame away. Aurora collided with a man's chest, a faint scent of tobacco wafting from his shirt. She looked up blankly. In Ethan's eyes, it was as if a meteor had streaked across the sky. The burly man next to them looked at Ethan awkwardly, his face a mixture of anger and fear. "Mr. Smith has taken a liking to this girl, has he? Well, I wouldn't dare compete with you." Ethan ignored the man's fawning and simply looked down at Aurora. She saw his thin lips part slightly, and then a cool voice said to her, "Do you want to come with me? I'll buy you 100,000 a month." Aurora was already terrified and just wanted to escape. So, without hesitation, she nodded and said, "Okay." But in Ethan's eyes, she saw a flicker of disappointment and contempt. As Aurora left the bar with Ethan and got into his luxury car, she thought to herself that perhaps he would never know that she had agreed to go with him not for the $100,000, but for love. For a year, Ethan was true to his word, giving her 100,000 every month. Aurora kept only a little over 1,000 for herself and gave the rest to her stepmother. Ethan didn't visit her every day, but he never stayed away for more than a week. So, with a lot of free time, Aurora would paint by herself or go out to sketch. Whenever Ethan came, he hardly spoke to her. It was either to sleep with her or just hold her while he slept. She knew he disdained talking to her, knew that to him, she was just a tool to satisfy his desires. So, she never said much either. If he was silent, she wouldn't start a conversation. She obediently fulfilled all his requests. But even so, he was still going to leave her. A year, just 1 year, and he was already tired of her. Aurora knelt on the floor in sorrow, humbly looking up at her gold provider and begging, "Please, don't leave me. I really don't need anything. Just let me stay by your side. Just, when you think of me, when you need me, come and see me. That's all." Chapter 4. The second man. Aurora had cast aside all her pride. In front of Ethan, she had never had any to begin with. But even so, Ethan told her with utter disdain, "Impossible. I'm getting married. My wife is a very pure and kind woman. You are not worthy to share a husband with her. Once I'm married, I will be devoted to her and will have no relations with any other woman." Aurora looked up in disappointment. The sincerity in Ethan's eyes completely shattered her heart. His true feelings for that woman sealed her humble wish in an abyss forever. "I understand. Let me help you pack your things," Aurora said. "Heh, giving up so quickly? Are there no other tricks up her sleeve?" Ethan looked contemptuously at the woman who, just a second ago, was desperately trying to make him stay, and was now resigned to her fate, offering to help him pack. Prostitutes truly are heartless, he thought coldly. Saying she didn't want him to leave was just an act. In the end, it was all about the money. He casually kicked over a suitcase Aurora had just finished packing. "Forget it. I don't want these things. I'll buy new ones after the wedding. I'm afraid my wife will find them dirty." Dirty? Aurora looked up at Ethan in disbelief. Even if she was humble, he couldn't use such a word to describe the woman who had shared his bed for a year. "You were my first. I've never been with another man," Aurora declared, word by word. Ethan nonchalantly lit a cigarette, blowing a smoke ring in her face like a cruel taunt. From now on, you can have a second man. He decided to deliver the final blow. Aurora closed her eyes, inhaling the familiar scent of his tobacco. Her heart felt as if it had fallen into a rotting abyss, never to climb out again. Ethan looked at her sorrowful, desperate face. For some reason, it seemed that only when she was miserable enough did the complexity and frustration in his own heart lessen. Aurora stood up, dragging her weary body toward the door. Ethan frowned at her staggering figure. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to find my second man," Aurora said bitterly. A wave of frustration washed over him. Ethan impatiently grabbed her and shoved an envelope into her hand. "Take this and get out." Aurora glanced at the money in the envelope. It was a thick stack, several times more than what she had received over the entire year. It seemed Ethan was willing to spend a lot to make a clean break with her. With a small smile, Aurora said nothing more. She didn't even have the strength to look at Ethan again. Taking the envelope, she walked out of the villa. Aurora's final smile was truly jarring. Ethan snorted coldly. As expected, it was always about the money. Aurora, physically and emotionally exhausted, finally reached her front door, only to find that her key wouldn't open the lock. Just as she was about to knock, her stepmother opened the door with a beaming smile. "Aurora, you're back." Too tired to force a smile, Aurora asked, "Why can't I open the lock?" Her stepmother replied sheepishly, "We just changed the locks. I didn't have a chance to tell you. I'll give you the key in a bit." Before Aurora could even step inside, her stepmother eagerly held out her hand. Aurora, you know Scarlett has another round of chemo soon, so?" Aurora sighed and handed the envelope from Ethan directly to her stepmother, unopened. Watching her stepmother's eyes widen in surprise as she counted the money, Aurora said with some guilt, "Mom, this is the last of it. Ethan, he doesn't want me anymore." Chapter 5. He's going to marry her. To Aurora's shock, her stepmother showed no surprise at all. Instead, she stuffed the envelope into her bag and said coldly, "In that case, you can leave." "What did you say?" Aurora stared at her, stunned, not understanding what she meant. Her stepmother smiled and called back into the house. "Scarlett, come out and say goodbye to your sister. It might be hard to see her again in the future." "Scarlett?" Aurora's eyes widened as she saw Scarlett, who was supposed to be pale and weak in a hospital bed, walk out looking healthy and beautifully dressed. How can you be?" Aurora pointed at Scarlett, too shocked to speak. Scarlett looked at her with contempt, flashing a beautiful diamond ring on her left hand. "See this? It's from my fiancé. He already proposed and we're getting married next week. My dear sister, can you guess who my fiancé is? I bet you know him. The new CEO of the Nanteng Group." "Nanteng? The new CEO?" Ethan Smith. Aurora shook her head frantically in disbelief. Impossible, it can't be. Ethan, you're lying." Scarlett shoved Aurora aside. Already weak and reeling from the shock, Aurora couldn't keep her balance and collapsed to the floor, a sharp pain shooting through her lower abdomen. But at that moment, she couldn't care less about the pain. She grabbed Scarlett's leg, her face streaked with tears, and begged, "Scarlett, even though Ethan doesn't want me anymore, I'll still work hard to earn money for your treatment." "Scarlett, you're my sister. Don't say such things to hurt me," Scarlett sneered. "Aurora, why deceive yourself? To tell you the truth, I was never sick. My mom and I just planned to use a useless little bitch like you to get some money, but we don't need it anymore. From now on, I'll have Ethan to love and dote on me, so I won't have to worry about money. You should get lost. This is my mom's and my house, not yours." With that, she slammed the door shut. Aurora stared numbly at the familiar door, finally realizing that ever since her father died, ever since Ethan abandoned her, she had been homeless. As she turned around, utterly devastated, she saw a familiar figure walking toward her house. The car parked nearby was Ethan's. Aurora's face turned deathly pale. She quickly hid, watching the man she loved so deeply walk into the home that had just cast her out. After a long time, Aurora turned away numbly, her steps heavy and difficult. The pain in her lower abdomen grew more and more intense. She had to lean against a tree on the roadside to catch her breath. "Aurora!" A surprised young man's voice came from behind her. Aurora turned wearily and vaguely saw Julian Miles, her childhood friend who had gone to study in the United States 5 years ago. Seeing her pale face, Julian anxiously supported her. "Aurora, what's wrong?" Aurora managed to grab the corner of his shirt. Before losing consciousness, she murmured, "Julian, my stomach hurts. It hurts." When Aurora woke up, she was lying in a hospital bed. The white sheets had the warm, sun-dried scent. Aurora stared blankly at the traces of light from the window for a long time before reaching out and slowly stroking the hair of Julian, who had fallen asleep by her bed. Julian looked up and smiled at her. "You're awake?" Aurora nodded weakly, forcing a slight smile. "Julian, when did you get back?" Julian shrugged. "I've been back for a month. I even went to your house, but your stepmother and Scarlett said you had moved out." Aurora froze, then gave a bitter smile. So it really was all a lie. Chapter 6. What right do you have? Aurora leaned weakly against the bed, her pretty face pale. Julian hesitated for a moment, then took her hand and said, "Aurora, did you know you're 1 month pregnant?" "What?" Aurora's eyes widened in shock. She was pregnant. How could that be? Ethan had always taken precautions. It was impossible for her to get pregnant. But at the same time, a flicker of hope ignited in her heart. If Ethan knew she was having his child, would he not leave her? With that thought, Aurora immediately got ready to leave the hospital and rushed to Ethan's apartment. Standing at the door that had been so familiar for a whole year, she hesitated. The cold, heartless expression on Ethan's face, when he threw her out, was still deeply etched in her mind. Before she could knock, the door opened and Ethan emerged looking rushed. "What are you doing here?" Ethan looked impatiently at Aurora standing at his door. "What? Was the money I gave you not enough?" Ethan walked over and disdainfully pinched her pretty face. Aurora looked at the disgust in his eyes, her heart aching. She asked in a pained voice, "Ethan, the person you're marrying, is it Scarlett Gable?" Ethan frowned immediately, a cold glint in his eyes. "How did you know? I really underestimated you. Let me tell you, Scarlett is not the same kind of woman as you. If you dare to do anything to hurt her, don't blame me for being ruthless. Do you know? Do you know that, Scarlett?" Aurora's face flushed with agitation. She couldn't take it anymore. She had so much to say, desperate to expose everything Scarlett and her deceitful stepmother had done. If Ethan knew that Scarlett and her stepmother had tricked her into selling herself, he would surely feel sorry for her and wouldn't marry Scarlett. But before Aurora could get the words out, Ethan's phone rang. Aurora clearly saw the name on the screen. Yeah, heh. A chill went through Aurora's heart. Ethan answered the phone, his voice instantly softening. "Yeah, what's wrong?" Scarlett's delicate voice came from the other end. "Ethan, please talk to my sister nicely. I'm afraid she can't handle it." Hearing Scarlett's hypocritical words, Aurora couldn't bear it any longer and shouted at Ethan, "Ethan, you pig, how could you believe the words of a deceitful bitch like Scarlett and kick me out?" Aurora trembled with anger. If it weren't for her stepmother lying about Scarlett having some terminal illness, forcing her to earn money for her treatment, would she have ended up working as a waitress in a bar? She once thought that Ethan had brought her back and supported her because he loved her, but now it seemed he had never respected her. In his eyes, she was just a plaything bought with money. Slap, a crisp slap shattered all of Aurora's remaining hopes. The look in Ethan's eyes was filled with a heart-wrenching disgust. Aurora incredulously clutched her swollen cheek and looked up at him. He had actually slapped her for Scarlett. You hit me." Aurora stared at Ethan, her face deathly pale. The loathing in his eyes could have sliced her to pieces. "Scarlett told me long ago that you're very good at badmouthing her. How dare you say such things about her right in front of me? Who's the real bitch here, should I remind you? Scarlett is a top student from T University. What are you? A woman who sells herself from a bar. What right do you have to talk about Scarlett?" Chapter 7. You disgust me, huh? So he didn't care that she called him a pig. All he cared about was her insulting Scarlett. But what about his insults to her? He had no idea that before she dropped out of school for Scarlett and her stepmother's lie, she too was a T University student. Not the woman who sold herself, he called her Aurora, felt as if her heart had been brutally stabbed again. From the phone, Scarlett's weak voice came through again. "Ethan, don't be too hard on my sister. I know she's not taking it well. If you upset her anymore, the baby in my belly will protest." "Baby? A baby? You had a child with her?" Aurora stared at Ethan, completely devastated. Hearing Aurora's question, Scarlett started to explain in a tearful voice, "Sister, can you hear me? Sister, I didn't do it on purpose. Ethan and I didn't mean to wrong you. Sister, please don't be angry. I couldn't bear to lose the baby." "Huh? Couldn't bear to lose the baby? didn't do it on purpose. Aurora felt as if her heart had been run over by a giant tire 1,000 times, the pain so intense she wished she could die right then and there. "Shut up!" Aurora screamed into the phone like a madwoman. She couldn't listen to Scarlett's nauseating performance any longer. "Ah, sister, you scared me my stomach. It hurts so much, Ethan. What should I do? It hurts so much. Will our baby be okay? I'm so scared." Scarlett's voice grew weaker and more panicked. Aurora just sneered. Scarlett's acting was one scene after another, without a break. Ethan anxiously gripped the phone, getting dressed while comforting Scarlett. "Scarlett, don't be afraid, I'm coming right now. Don't be afraid, relax. Nothing will happen." Aurora stared intently at Ethan's figure as he quickly dressed to leave and grabbed his sleeve. She had to make one last attempt. Even though Ethan was so heartless, she couldn't control herself. She couldn't bear to let him go. "Ethan, Scarlett's child is your child, but what about mine? What about my child?" The moment the words left her mouth, Aurora regretted them. She covered her mouth. She knew she shouldn't have said it. Ethan had never allowed her to get pregnant, but she stubbornly wanted to make one last plea. But it was too late. Aurora watched in horror as Ethan's face instantly darkened, his eyes filled with a ferocious rage. "Ah, let me go, Ethan, I beg you. Let me go, I'm not going to the hospital. I'm not." Aurora struggled desperately, but her full strength was useless against Ethan's grip. Her hands were already bruised purple. Ethan emotionlessly dragged her, threw her into the car, and then quickly got into the driver's seat. His eyes were icy, without a trace of pity. In the speeding car, Aurora looked at Ethan's expressionless profile and felt truly scared. She frantically grabbed his arm, trembling as she pleaded, "Ethan, I was just kidding. I'm not pregnant, really, believe me." Ethan glanced at her. Her reaction only made him more curt. "I took precautions every time and gave you the pills you were supposed to take, but you still managed to get pregnant. You're quite scheming. But I told you long ago, a woman like you who sells herself is not worthy of having my child. Aurora, you still disgust me. Did you think having a child could tie me down? That you could get something you were never entitled to? I'm telling you, go to the hospital and get rid of it immediately. A person like you is not worthy of having my child. My child can only be Scarlett's, unworthy, disgusting." Chapter 8. Mommy's with you. Aurora watched as such words spewed wantonly from Ethan's handsome, thin lips. Her heart felt like a piece of waste paper he had mercilessly torn to shreds, so much so that even the pain felt numb. She had been with him for a whole year, and it couldn't compare to the short month he had known Scarlett. Because he loved Scarlett, he could humiliate and hurt her like this. But that was her child. The little one had been in her belly for over 2 months. From the day she knew of its existence, she had wanted to protect it with care. With just one sentence, Ethan said to get rid of it. How could she bear it? How could she let it go? "Ethan, I'm begging you, don't take away my child, please. I don't want you anymore, and I don't expect to stay by your side. I have nothing left but this child. Please, let me keep him. I'll take him and leave, and I'll never disturb your life with Scarlett again." Aurora made her final, desperate plea. But Ethan, as cruel and heartless as ever, shattered her last, humble request. "Let you keep my child? In your dreams, a disgusting woman like you, who worships vanity and can easily sell her own body for money. The thought of you keeping my child would make me wake up from nightmares in disgust." Aurora watched the speeding car get closer and closer to the hospital, watched Ethan's consistently cold and heartless face. Her heart finally plunged into an ice cellar. Heh. Aurora let out a low laugh. Ethan frowned and glanced at her. This lowly woman, what new trick was she trying to pull? Aurora took one last look at Ethan, the man she had once loved so deeply. She lifted her chin, no longer humble. "Ethan Smith, you are not worthy of my love. This is the last time I will beg you. Even a vicious tiger won't eat its own cubs. You are not even human to so casually want to kill my child. Fine, I'll do as you wish." With that, Aurora quickly opened the car door with her hand. Then, steeling herself and closing her eyes, she jumped out, her hands protectively wrapped around her stomach. "My child, Mommy isn't strong enough to protect you. Mommy loved the wrong person. Mommy will die with you." Chapter 9. A new girlfriend. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. A little girl stood at the entrance of a street-front shop, seriously blowing bubbles. Her little face was covered in a thin layer of sweat, looking utterly adorable. Inside the shop, A stylishly dressed young woman kept an eye on the little girl while turning to the woman doing her nails. "Aurora, your daughter is getting more and more beautiful." Aurora, wearing a light blue face mask, glanced at her daughter's small figure. A look of satisfaction and relief flashed in her beautiful eyes. Being able to keep Momo was the luckiest thing that had ever happened to her. Just then, she heard the little girl outside scream, "Who are you? Get out of the way, little thing. Don't be a nuisance." The man in the lead shoved her, and Momo's small body immediately tumbled to the ground. The next second, the little girl burst into loud sobs. "Mommy, bad guys are here. Bad guys are here." Aurora, suppressing her anger, finished setting the last 2 diamonds for her client and rushed out to scoop up Momo. "Momo, go inside. Don't be afraid, Mommy's here." Aurora pushed her daughter's small body into the shop, then grabbed a badminton racket from the table and charged toward the 3 large men with great momentum. In her hands, the badminton racket seemed like a reanimated monster, swinging wildly at the men's heads. Aurora showed no mercy or hesitation. I'll kill you, you think you can bully me?" Not so easy. The big men were beaten until they were covering their heads and scurrying around. Seeing that they were defenseless, Aurora finally lowered the racket and roared, "Get out and tell your boss if he wants me to move. It's not going to be that easy." The men fled in terror. Just then, a lavishly dressed man and woman got out of the latest model Porsche parked at the entrance and stared in shock at the scene before them. Aurora had just let out a sigh of relief while holding her daughter when she looked up and saw the man and woman walking in. She immediately sucked in a sharp breath. Ethan Smith had brought his new girlfriend, Isabel Young, to get her nails done, only to find that the shop was owned by the stubborn holdout who had been causing him so much trouble lately. It was this woman who had repeatedly delayed the implementation of his new project. When he walked in, he saw Aurora holding a soft little girl, staring at him in shock. "It's you." As soon as Ethan spoke, Aurora immediately composed herself. Without giving him a second glance, she turned to tidy up the shop, discreetly telling her daughter, "Momo, go play inside. Mommy has to work." Ethan's gaze was unconsciously drawn to the small figure. He frowned slightly. Was that Aurora's child? A cold sneer formed in his heart, along with a pang of bitterness. She was married. HMPH, wasn't she the one who said she would never leave him? Judging by the child's size, she must have had a baby not long after leaving him. What a heartless whore. "Aurora Gable, didn't you see me?" Finally, Ethan couldn't help but ask in a cold, sharp tone. His voice made Aurora feel like she was about to cry, but she was no longer the pitiful woman who begged for his love. She simply said to Isabel Young beside him, "Miss, what price range are you looking for?" Isabel glanced at Ethan and asked with confusion, "Ethan, do you know her?" Ethan ignored her question, his eyes fixed on Aurora, who was completely ignoring him, his body radiating hostility. Seeing Ethan's obvious interest in Aurora, Isabel immediately became unhappy. She pulled her hand back and pouted, "Ethan, let's go. I don't want to get them done anymore." Aurora shrugged but said nothing to stop them. Although she didn't want to turn away business, she truly wanted nothing more to do with Ethan. "We'll leave after it's done." Ethan's voice was so cold it sent a chill down both women's spines. Isabel shrank back and, almost in the next second, didn't dare to say another word. She obediently extended her hand and sat down. Aurora asked flatly, "Which type of stones would you like?" "The most expensive, of course. Don't you know that only the most expensive is worthy of my status?" Isabel's arrogant attitude made Aurora frown slightly. Chapter 10. As long as you like it the most expensive? Aurora sneered inwardly and said, "The most expensive ones are $4,000 per stone. Looking at your nails, you'll need at least 7, which comes to a total of $280,000. What? Are you selling real diamonds or something? That's so expensive." Isabel's mouth fell open in shock. Ethan, standing by, couldn't help but feel a mix of amusement and exasperation. This woman was really charging an outrageous price. You could buy real diamonds for that much, but Aurora just blinked innocently and smiled slightly. "You said you wanted the most expensive, so I quoted the price directly. Of course, if payment is an issue, we have a variety of price ranges. We have cheaper options for a few dozen dollars as well." Her tone, however, was just the thing to provoke Isabel. She glared at Aurora and said through gritted teeth, "Of course, I want the best. My boyfriend is very rich, that amount is nothing. Hearing this, a smile appeared on Ethan's lips. He deliberately leaned over and planted a kiss on Isabel's cheek, saying magnanimously, "As long as you like it. 280,000 is nothing at all." Aurora stared at the disgusting pair in front of her, regretting not saying 40,000 per stone. While kissing Isabel, Ethan looked up at Aurora but didn't get the reaction he expected, which made him feel a surge of irritation. As Aurora was busy looking for the stones, Momo came running out, staring at Ethan's handsome face. Ethan's attention was immediately captured by the adorable little girl. He couldn't help but ask, "What's your name and how old are you?" Momo counted on her little fingers and said, "I'm 5 and my name is Momo." 5 years old, Ethan couldn't help but frown. So she had a child with someone else right after leaving him, or could it be? Could this little girl be his child? At this thought, Ethan's inquisitive gaze turned cold and sharp as he looked at the busy Aurora. Momo, however, skipped off to continue blowing bubbles. But then, with a wah, both Aurora and Ethan looked toward the entrance to see little Momo had fallen to the ground. Aurora was about to rush over, but she saw that Ethan had already taken a long stride and scooped up the crying little girl. "What's wrong? Did you get hurt?" Ethan asked Momo carefully and with concern. Momo stopped crying and rubbed her eyes, pointing at the bubble bottle in her hand with a wronged expression. In a sweet, childish voice, she said, "It's spilled. It's all gone." Ethan smiled and shook his head. Cradling Momo, he walked out, whispering gently, "Uncle will take you to buy a new one." "Don't go," Aurora's shout from behind made Ethan stop and frown at her. Aurora quickly walked over, snatched her daughter, and looked at him coldly. "That won't be necessary, sir. I'll take my daughter myself later." But Momo, in her arms, seemed a bit reluctant. "Mommy's busy," she whispered. "Uncle can take me." Annoyed, Aurora tapped Momo's nose and said sternly, "What did Mommy teach you? You can't go with strangers, and you can't take things from strangers." Aurora deliberately emphasized the word strangers. Seeing her mother was angry, little Momo could only pout and run back inside, looking wronged. Chapter 11. I'll call the cops. Aurora's actions and words stung Ethan's heart. A stranger? Heh, yes, in the end, that's what they were now, strangers. But the deep, uncontrollable feeling of heaviness in his heart was suffocating. Just then, the door was pushed open again, and a man with gold-rimmed glasses walked in. The moment Aurora saw him, her expression immediately relaxed. And Momo, who had gone inside, immediately shouted and ran to him, "Daddy, Daddy's back." Hearing those 2 words, Ethan froze. The thought that Momo might be his daughter was completely shattered. He looked away in disappointment, then back at Aurora, mocking himself internally. So, the woman who had begged him not to leave had found a new lover so soon after leaving him. What a hypocritical woman. A liar. Momo held the man's hand and whined, "Daddy, take me to buy bubbles." Julian immediately picked up Momo and said dotingly, "Okay, let's go right now." As Julian left with Momo in his arms, Aurora added, "Julian, remember to bring back some beef. I'll make steak for you guys tonight." "Okay." His reply came as the father and daughter's voices faded from the doorway. The stark contrast in her attitude was enough to make Ethan furious. A sarcastic smile on his lips, he walked toward Aurora with a menacing aura. At that moment, Aurora finished the last diamond and, with a cheerful face, held out her hand to the approaching Ethan. "Sir, time to pay." Ethan's anger was abruptly choked off. He gritted his teeth, his brow twitching, and pulled out a stack of cash from his wallet, only to feel a few dark lines form on his forehead. He hadn't brought much cash with him. Ethan looked up, awkwardly meeting Aurora's gaze. "Do you take cards here?" Aurora, who had been watching him take out the money with gleaming eyes, now had a flash of anger. "Are you kidding me? A small shop like mine, how could I have a card machine? I want cash. Hey, you're not trying to skip out on the bill, are you?" Being stared at with such suspicion, Ethan's expression grew darker. He glanced at his watch. He had an important meeting soon that couldn't be delayed. With a resolute move, he took off the diamond ring from his finger and placed it on the table. "Here, leave this as a deposit. I'll bring the money to get it back." With that, he walked out with Isabel. Aurora stared blankly at the priceless ring on the table, not forgetting to shout after him, "Remember to come back and pay." Hearing this, Ethan finally snapped. He shoved Isabel into the car, locked the doors, and then turned back to the shop with a murderous look on his face. Aurora had been smiling gleefully at the money, but when she looked up, she shivered in fear. "You, what are you doing? We're closing. Just remember to bring the money back." "You can go," Aurora stammered, so nervous she almost bit her tongue. But Ethan had no intention of listening. He used his body to pin Aurora's slender frame between himself and the wall, his handsome face moving closer and closer to hers. Aurora, her face full of disgust and revulsion, said, "What on earth do you want? If you have something to say, say it. If you try anything funny, I'll call the cops." Chapter 12. Do you really love him? Seeing how much she despised him, the anger in Ethan's chest burned hotter and hotter until his whole body ached. He couldn't stop himself from biting down on her chattering little mouth, not wanting to hear any more hurtful words. MMPH, Aurora struggled, glaring at the brute before her, but her strength was nothing compared to Ethan's. As she watched herself being conquered, Ethan's kiss, just like 5 years ago, made it increasingly difficult for her to control herself. Ethan stared blankly at Aurora, his eyes filled with rage. "Liar, didn't you say you loved me? Didn't you say you would do anything to not leave me? How could you have someone else's child so quickly? Or were you already cheating on me with some other man while you were with me?" Slap. A red mark instantly appeared on Ethan's fair face. Aurora glared at him, furious and unyielding. "Ethan Smith, you scumbag, what right do you have to say that to me? Let me tell you, not only have I never done something only a scumbag like you would do, but what if I had? Even a vicious tiger won't eat its own cubs. Ethan Smith, have you forgotten how you personally killed your own flesh and blood back then? A person like you, are you even qualified to talk to me about fidelity?" After she finished, her gaze toward him became even more disgusted and repulsed, as if looking at him for another second was unbearable. Ethan clutched his face in shock, his knuckles white with rage. "Fine, Aurora Gable, you've got guts. In all my life, no woman has ever dared to hit me." As he spoke, a fierce, terrifying light appeared in his eyes. However, none of this scared Aurora. As if one slap wasn't enough, she kicked Ethan hard in the shin. "Get the hell out, you're not welcome here. Bring my money back tomorrow morning, and then we'll have no reason to see each other again." Ethan's brow twitched in pain, but he forced himself to remain calm, looking at Aurora. More than the physical pain, he was bothered by the indescribable discomfort and oppression in his heart. Seeing that she was still fixated on the money he owed, he said with contempt, "HMPH, you still love money as much as you did back then." "Gold digger?" Aurora stood with her hands on her hips, unfazed. "So what? I am a gold digger, I do love money. What's it to you?" Ethan was so angry he wanted to storm out, but for some reason, he turned back and asked quietly, "Do you really love that man?" Aurora hadn't expected him to ask such a question and couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Then she looked into his deep, handsome eyes and said, word by word, "Of course I love him. He's Momo's father and my husband." Ethan felt as if his entire heart had been pierced by a hole, letting the wind whistle through. He couldn't stay any longer. He didn't want to see that man return with their daughter, a picture of a happy family of 3. Watching Ethan's retreating back, Aurora's shoulders finally slumped. She stared blankly at the glass door, her thoughts a blur. After a while, for some reason, tears began to fall. Chapter 13, A Family of 4. "Mommy, is the steak ready yet?" Momo ran into the kitchen, her face full of anticipation as she looked at Aurora. Aurora smiled. "You little foodie, it's almost ready. Go wait outside." Momo happily ran back to the living room and shouted to Julian, who was reading the newspaper at the table, "Daddy, it's almost ready." Just then, the doorbell rang. Julian immediately got up to open it. As expected, a short-haired woman in a pink professional suit was standing outside. The corners of Julian's eyes instantly brightened. "Chloe, you're finally back. Dinner's almost ready." He then naturally took the woman's bag. "Godmommy's back," Momo happily pounced on her, and Chloe dotingly picked up her small body. Just then, Aurora came out of the kitchen with a platter. Seeing the sweat on her forehead, Chloe immediately glared at Julian, who had already put down the bag and sat down at the table. "You got off work so early, why didn't you help Aurora more?" Julian smiled guiltily. "Well, I was afraid you'd get jealous." Chloe didn't buy it. "Please, he chased you for so long and couldn't win you over. What do I have to be jealous of?" Not only did Julian blush in embarrassment, but even little Momo giggled. Aurora shook her head helplessly, a smile on her face. Chloe Green was her roommate here. Back then, Julian had saved her and Momo's lives, and in his pursuit of her, he was always coming over. Unexpectedly, it ended up bringing this pair of bickering lovers together. Momo called Chloe Godmummy and found Goddaddy too troublesome, so she just called him Daddy. After dinner and clearing the table, Aurora sat on her bed, counting the day's earnings. To be honest, if it weren't for Ethan being so generous and letting her rip him off, she wouldn't have made so much money at once. Thinking of this, Aurora still felt quite pleased. No matter what Ethan was like, money was always a good thing. After counting the money, she looked down and saw the priceless light blue diamond ring. Her cheerful mood immediately sank. A beautiful, dazzling ring. Imagining it on Ethan's long, handsome fingers, Aurora's eyes reddened again. He had been too cruel back then. Even if he didn't care about her, he could so casually decide to get rid of their own flesh and blood. It had truly broken her heart. Lifting her face and shaking her head, Aurora commanded herself not to think about it anymore. She had given up on Ethan 5 years ago. Now, she lived only for her daughter. She turned and kissed the adorable face of Momo, who was playing by herself, then got up to take a shower. After Aurora left, Momo curiously picked up the small box she had left on the bed. When she opened it, a sparkling blue thing immediately caught her eye. "Wow, what a pretty keychain," Momo exclaimed. Momo happily put the ring on her finger and spun it around, but in a moment of carelessness, the ring easily slipped off her slender little finger. However, even a priceless ring was just a pretty keychain in Momo's eyes, so she wasn't too bothered by losing it. She stuck out her tongue, closed the lid, and placed the box back where it was on the bed. Chapter 14. Away to repay the next morning, Aurora waited in her shop in high spirits. The moment she saw Ethan's figure appear, she greeted him with joy. Seeing her ecstatic smile, Ethan's heart eased, and he smiled back. "What, so happy to see me?" Aurora immediately put on a straight face and held out her hand. "The money." Ethan shook his head helplessly. Suddenly, he found those greedy, sparkling eyes to be quite adorable. He took out a stack of cash from his bag but didn't give it to her right away. "Where's my ring? Give me my ring." Aurora rolled her eyes, her smile gone, and disdainfully tossed the small box to him. Ethan caught it and opened it casually, but in the next second, his face turned livid. He had been too quick to trust her. This woman had always been the type to do anything for money, and now she was even more so. Ethan, furious, threw the box back at Aurora. "You really are a woman who would do anything for money. I never thought you'd pull a trick like this." Aurora caught the box, stunned, and opened it in confusion. It was empty. Her mind went blank. She frowned and said nervously, I didn't, I really put it in there." Ethan looked at her acting with utter contempt. "Very good, quite the actress. This ring of mine isn't something you can buy for just $280,000. You're quite the schemer." Aurora knew, of course, that his ring was extremely valuable, but what hurt her most at that moment was Ethan's attitude. He didn't trust her. He didn't trust her 5 years ago, and he still didn't trust her now. She looked at his obviously disgusted eyes, her heart aching to the extreme. With a surge of defiance, she threw the box aside and said, "Fine, tell me, how much is your ring worth? I'll compensate you, okay?" Ethan slammed his hand on the table, grabbing her small hand and holding it tight, his eyes deep and bottomless. "I won't ask for more, just 1 million. Give me back 1 million and we'll call it even for the ring." "What?" Aurora felt the whole world spin. $1 million? How was she supposed to earn that back? Seeing her look of utter devastation, Ethan couldn't help but frown in confusion. "I gave you quite a bit of money back then. You couldn't have spent it all so quickly, could you?" To break up with her, he hadn't been stingy and had given her a large sum. To have spent it all so fast, could it have been on that man? The thought of this possibility made Ethan feel even more uncomfortable. "That money was a gift from you. Are you trying to take it back?" Aurora stared at him warily. She had given that money to her stepmother long ago. There was no way to get it back. "I don't want to take it back. I just want you to compensate me for my ring now," Ethan roared in frustration. Was he that petty of a man? Would he really take back money he had given away? Ethan's brow was furrowed so tightly he could have crushed a fly. He was about to go mad with anger. Hearing this, Aurora let out a slight sigh of relief. She then bent down, took an envelope from a cabinet, and handed it to him. "Here's $50,000. I'll pay you back the rest in installments." Ethan's gaze lingered on the sliver of fair skin exposed at her chest from her movements. His eyes glinted with a subtle desire. I'm not interested in coming here every day to check when you can pay me back. Then, what do you want? Aurora's chest heaved with anger. She felt hopeless. It wasn't like she lost his ring on purpose. She thought she was going to make a huge profit, but instead, her fate had taken a drastic turn first thing in the morning. Perhaps there's another way, Ethan said. His eyes narrowed, fixed on the face that had become even more charming than 5 years ago. Chapter 15. I love my husband very much. He suddenly moved closer, his warm breath fanning against the back of her ear and neck, creating a subtly charged atmosphere. Feeling a little overwhelmed, Aurora leaned back, but Ethan pulled her even tighter. Spend one night with me, and the $1 million is written off. His voice was seductive, yet held an almost imperceptible hint of contempt. Ethan leaned in for a kiss, full of confidence. Even after 5 years, he couldn't deny that she intrigued him at every moment. Aroused by his kiss, Aurora struggled and twisted, which only stimulated Ethan's senses further. With a sudden pull, he lifted her onto his lap in an intimate position. What are you doing? Aurora stammered in panic, looking at Ethan. She never imagined he would make such a shameless proposal. Ethan took a deep breath, his senses filled with her fragrance. He moved closer to her ear, and seeing it turn bright red, he said with satisfaction, What? 1 million for one night. That's a pretty good deal, isn't it? Unable to bear his words any longer, Aurora pushed him away with all her might and stared at him from a distance. The emptiness in his arms and the sight of Aurora's wary expression from afar left a bitter taste in Ethan's mouth. Then just name your price, he said. Aurora clenched her fists, unable to hold back her anger. Don't even think about it, Ethan Smith. Let me tell you, I'm not the same Aurora I was before. I have a family and a child now. I love my daughter very much, and I love my husband very much, so no amount of money will make me do it. Loves her husband very much? That sentence completely triggered Ethan. Back then, Aurora had been with him for money, but now she was willing to turn down money for another man? A huge wave of jealousy churned inside him. Ethan's face turned livid as he took out his checkbook, scribbled a series of numbers, and then waved it in front of Aurora with a mocking smile. 2 million. Is that enough? Seeing his arrogant and disdainful smile, Aurora felt her pride being trampled under his feet once again. Did he really look down on her that much? Her heart ached as if it were being pounded by fists, the wounds from 5 years ago torn open again by the very man she had once loved so deeply. Aurora lowered her head, her body trembling slightly with humiliation and anger. She didn't want to look at him and said in a low voice, Get out. Even if I were broke, I wouldn't want your money. Unable to see her expression, Ethan curled his lip in contempt and sneered, Really? You don't want it? You were quite eager for it 5 years ago. Aurora looked up, and faced with his relentless harassment, she finally exploded. She snatched the check from his hand, tore it to pieces, and then let out a strange laugh. What a joke. Do you think the price from 5 years ago is the same as now? Ethan Smith, you want to give me money. Well, I'm sorry, even an antique appreciates in value. I, Aurora Gable, have appreciated too. Hearing this, an even deeper, more sarcastic smile appeared on his face, so his offer was too low. She was still a gold digger after all. Name your price. Aurora clenched her fists so tightly she dug her nails into her palms, forcing a wanton smile. At least 10 million, I'd say. What? Ethan's eyes widened. 10 million for one night. Did this woman think she was the Queen of England or a Japanese princess? Chapter 16. Have a few drinks with me. Aurora glanced at him with a smirk, knowing that no one would be foolish enough to pay 10 million for one night with a woman. She looked at Ethan provocatively. To her surprise, Ethan actually looked resigned and started writing a check for 10 million. Furious, Aurora grabbed a stick that was leaning against the wall and without any hesitation, swung it at the unsuspecting Ethan, who was busy writing. The blow was delivered with full force. Ethan staggered, catching himself on the table to keep from falling. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he looked in shock at the enraged Aurora. Are you crazy? Damn woman, who gave you the nerve to challenge my limits again and again? First a slap, now a stick. This woman was unbelievably audacious. Aurora was also so angry that tears welled up in her eyes. Her nails dug deep into her palms. the sharp pain, the only thing stopping the tears from falling. She couldn't lose face in front of him again, not ever. Ethan Smith, what do you look like right now? Don't you see you're like a dog in heat? What did you say? How dare you? Such an insult was enough to drive Ethan mad with rage. But Aurora continued to shout without fear. Get out of here, I will pay you back what I owe you, even if I have to sell everything I own. But let me tell you, don't even think about it. Not for 10 million, not even for 100 million. Ethan seemed stunned by her frantic expression. He asked blankly, do you really love your husband that much? Aurora raised an eyebrow and smiled brightly. Yes, very, very much. Her reply was so direct and swift that Ethan felt his heart being brutally stabbed. He really felt terrible. Fine, I'm leaving. And you remember, 1 million, not a cent less. With that, he left without looking back. Watching him go, Aurora slumped into a chair like a deflated balloon. Her face grew even paler, and tears she could no longer hold back streamed down her cheeks. Back then, he had insulted her, looked down on her, left her, and disbelieved her. She could endure it all, but she would never give him that chance again. With that thought, Aurora wiped away her tears. No matter how hard it was, she had to pay back the money she owed Ethan. Having made up her mind, Aurora stood up and went to a cabinet in the back. After rummaging for a while, she found a business card. It had been left by a customer named Liang Yu, who ran a bar. Really? Miss Yu, that's wonderful. Don't worry, I'll do a great job on the girls' nails. After the call, Aurora happily put down the card and prepared to leave. Liang Yu had agreed to let her do the nails for the girls at her bar. It was a good business opportunity, so she didn't dare to delay. By the time she finished her work in the afternoon and walked out of the break room, it was already dark. Aurora frowned at the crowded bar. It had been much quieter when she arrived. Sniffling, she grabbed her tool bag and was about to make her way through the crowd when a man's strong arm blocked her path. Well, what a little beauty. Come on, have a few drinks with me. Aurora looked in horror at the man's disgustingly drunk face and tried to pull away. Let go of me, I'm not one of the girls here. But a woman's strength was no match for a man's. No matter how much she struggled, she couldn't break free and was dragged into a private room. The room was crowded, and her shouts were drowned out by the noise. Chapter 17. I beg you to let me go. Ethan sat on the sofa, his eyes narrowed as he watched Aurora being pawed at by several men, his expression growing darker by the second. She wouldn't take his money, but she had no problem coming back to a place like this to do her old job. What a hypocritical woman, Ethan sneered as he watched Aurora being pushed back and forth between the men. Finally, when a bald old man poured red wine all over her and was about to press his mouth to her neck, Ethan stood up and kicked him away. The old man turned around angrily, but when he saw Ethan's face, as cold as a snow-capped mountain, he quickly lowered his head and forced a smile. Oh, I didn't realize Mr. Smith had his eye on this woman too. Of course, she's all yours. With that, he lifted Aurora and pushed her into Ethan's arms. Ethan caught her with a cold smile and dragged her to the adjacent private room. Once inside, he threw her onto the sofa. You, what do you want? Aurora asked in a panic, dizzily staring at the menacing figure of Ethan approaching her. Ethan's eyes were fixed on the white skin of her thighs, revealed by her slightly lifted skirt from the rough movement. The lights, the scent, and the woman's faintly visible face, it was all incredibly alluring. What do you think I want? This isn't the first time for us. Why are you being so pretentious? Ethan said with a wicked smile as he walked over and pinned her hands. Looking at the beautiful, enchanting woman beneath him, Ethan lost control again. Her scent, the feeling she gave him, for all these years, no one had been able to replace her. Not even the woman he had once been prepared to marry, Scarlet Gable. Aurora bit her lip tightly. All of Ethan's actions were a swift and relentless conquest. Although Ethan was furious, the moment he touched her, his movements became gentle. He didn't even know why he was still filled with such tenderness at a time like this. Aurora's face was covered in tears. She put on her clothes and slapped him hard. Ethan gently touched his face, completely enraged. Aurora Gable, how many times is this? Damn woman, do you really think you can get away with hitting me again and again? A crazy, fierce light flashed in Aurora's eyes. She raised her hand and slapped him again, shouting, I did hit you, so what? Ethan Smith, I am not the same Aurora from 5 years ago who you could easily buy with money. Can you please stay away from me from now on? You're being really pathetic, Ethan's eyes were bloodshot with rage. "You will pay for your foolishness?" His voice was as cold as ice, making Aurora tremble. Forcing down her fear, she looked up and asked calmly, "Since you've gotten what you wanted, can I leave now? My family is waiting for me. Mr. Smith, I beg you, let me go, okay?" "HMPH, family? What is your husband waiting for you?" Ethan sneered, his voice dripping with jealousy. Aurora lifted her chin. "Of course. My husband will definitely be waiting for me." That sentence finally pushed Ethan over the edge. He grabbed her, dragged her out of the bar, and shoved her into the passenger seat of his car. "What are you doing? What on earth are you doing?" Aurora struggled in terror. Ethan said coolly, "I just want to see if your husband will mind if you don't come home all night." Chapter 18, "Get out when you've seen enough, you're crazy. You madman, let me out. Let me out, my daughter will be waiting for me too." Aurora pounded on Ethan. But the car only sped up. Ethan turned and roared, "What the hell does your daughter have to do with me?" The car flew down the highway. Aurora looked out the window at the guardrails rushing past, and her face turned pale with fear. She clutched Ethan's sleeve and begged, "Please, I was wrong. I'll pay you back as soon as I can. Please let me go, okay? I'm not like you, I can't afford to play these games. What's the point of this? Aren't you afraid of making Scarlett angry?" It would have been better if she hadn't mentioned Scarlett. The mention of that woman only made Ethan angrier. "Don't talk to me about her," he roared. He once thought that weak, pitiful woman was someone he should protect for the rest of his life. But he saw her true colors before they even had the wedding. Not only was she extravagant, but she was also a compulsive liar. She was a huge disappointment. Fueled by rage, Ethan floored the accelerator. The car was going extremely fast. At such a speed, it was easy to feel suffocated. Aurora's constitution was a bit weak, and she fainted. Looking at the woman who was only quiet when she was unconscious, Ethan felt a pang of bitterness in his heart. "Ah, what are you doing?" Ethan, when Aurora regained consciousness, she saw Ethan's hand firmly on her chest. Looking down, she was shocked to find she was only wearing a pair of light purple panties. She immediately flushed and struggled to cover herself. Ethan watched her reaction with satisfaction. She had almost stopped struggling now. As expected, her body couldn't lie, she was still very much attracted to him. The thought, for some reason, filled him with a proud sense of satisfaction. Just as Aurora had completely given up struggling and was about to give in to a night of passion with Ethan, a coquettish voice suddenly came from the doorway. In that instant, her world spun, and all the passion drained out of her. "Ethan, darling, not bad. Looks like you won't be needing me tonight." Scarlett Gable leaned leisurely against the doorway, a look of worldly amusement and mockery on her face as she watched the two entangled on the bed, acting every bit the part of the rightful wife. Being caught naked in bed by her own sister, Aurora felt utterly humiliated, so ashamed she wished she could dig a hole and bury herself in it. After recognizing who it was, Scarlett laughed even more brazenly. "Well, isn't it, my dear sister? It seems all these years haven't been enough for you to give up. My Ethan really is charming." Ethan, interrupted mid-act, was also very annoyed. He frowned impatiently at Scarlett, who was enjoying the show. "Have you seen enough? If you've seen enough, get out." Chapter 19, Lost Dignity. Scarlett was completely unfazed by Ethan's coldness and obvious disgust. In fact, she smiled even more triumphantly. "Hee, you're in such a hurry to get rid of me. But don't forget, I'm your legally wedded wife, Ethan Smith, and you, Aurora Gable, you really impress me. You won't even spare your own brother-in-law. You're truly shameless." Aurora's face turned pale with anger, but being completely naked, she was too ashamed and furious to say anything. Once Scarlett left, Aurora immediately jumped out of bed, with so much force that even Ethan couldn't hold her back. Watching her get dressed with a swift, cold expression, Ethan's anger flared up. "What are you doing?" Aurora gave a self-deprecating sneer. "Can't you see? I'm getting dressed. I'm going home. You're not allowed," Ethan ordered domineeringly. Aurora paid him no mind, not even pausing her movements. Seeing that she wouldn't even look at him, Ethan angrily grabbed her. "Damn it, did you not hear me? I said, you're not allowed to get dressed, and you're not allowed to leave." However, Aurora, pulled by brute force, didn't resist much. But her pale face, peeking out from under her hair, was streaked with tears. Ethan froze. Since they had met again, Aurora had always been strong-willed, but seeing her tears now, like a broken dam, he felt a momentary sense of helplessness. Her tears fell, drop by drop, onto the back of his hand. The hot tears streamed from her once clear eyes, turning them red. His heart felt as if it had been hit by something powerful and unexpected. Ethan frowned slightly. He actually felt a dull ache in his chest. "Don't cry." He stepped forward and held her. "All right, I'm not in the mood anymore. I won't touch you tonight. Let's just sleep." With that, he tried to lie down with her in his arms. "No," Aurora shrieked. She forcefully pushed his arm away, stood up trembling, and prepared to run for the door. She didn't want to stay here. She couldn't stay here. What right did she have to stay here? Scarlett's words and expression just now were like sharp needles piercing her heart, mercilessly reminding her that Ethan was Scarlett's husband. Seeing her intention, Ethan shouted angrily, "Damn it, stop right there, do you hear me?" Aurora couldn't help but sneer. She had already lost love 5 years ago. Did she have to lose her dignity as well 5 years later? No, she wouldn't, shaking her head. She ignored Ethan's words and ran straight out. But just as she stepped out the door, she was pulled back by a strong force. Turning to face Ethan's lawless expression, Aurora was thoroughly enraged. She opened her mouth and bit down on him, hard and without mercy. Ethan frowned tightly, enduring the pain, and stared at the woman who was biting his arm like a piranha. After a long moment, he said faintly, "Are you done biting?" Aurora let go, her eyes filled with tears, and yelled, "Ethan Smith, are you done yet? It's been 5 years, a whole 5 years. Isn't that enough? I'm begging you, should I kneel down for you? I just beg you to let me go, just let me go." Chapter 20. A stubborn holdout. As Aurora spoke, she started to kneel. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. 5 years ago, she knelt and begged him not to leave. 5 years later, she was about to kneel and beg him again, but this time, she was begging him to let her go. She really didn't love him anymore, or perhaps she never had. The thought of this possibility filled Ethan with an unbearable emptiness, a hollow feeling as if he had lost 5 whole years of his life. It was an indescribable discomfort, but he still subconsciously reached out to stop her from kneeling. To his surprise, she immediately shook off his hand with a look of disgust. "I really can't handle this arm that has been with 1,000 women. Ethan Smith, I don't need your hypocritical mercy now. I just beg you to never appear in front of me again." With that, she turned and ran out. As she ran out the door, she was grabbed again and pulled forward. "What are you doing now?" Aurora's expression was as if she had encountered someone with a contagious disease. Surprisingly, Ethan wasn't angry. He just said faintly, "You can't get a cab here, I'll drive you back." The car left the Smith estate. Halfway through the drive, Aurora's phone rang. She looked down and saw it was Julian. She answered, and Julian's anxious voice came through. "Aurora, when are you coming back? Momo won't stop crying. Chloe can't calm her down, she just wants her mommy." Hearing this, Aurora felt both anxious and angry. She tried to keep her voice calm. "I'm almost home, it'll be quick. It's okay, don't worry." Long after she hung up, Ethan couldn't help but ask, "Was that your husband?" Aurora looked up, her eyebrows raised noncommittally. "Yes, my husband and my daughter are waiting for me at home. So, Ethan Smith, could you please drive a little faster?" Looking at Aurora's still red eyes from her earlier crying, Ethan felt a mix of heartache and a sour, awkward feeling. She was someone else's wife, her daughter was someone else's child. All of this was a stark reminder of the facts, and Aurora's attitude left him with nothing to say, so he turned back and drove in silence. At the Monday morning meeting, a group of usually well-composed company executives sat nervously in their chairs. At this moment, nearly everyone had their heads down, as if afraid of an impending disaster. Ethan hadn't slept for nights since dropping Aurora off. Now, clearly sleep-deprived and irritable, he frowned tightly, glaring at the timid executives below. "Can anyone tell me when exactly we can start construction on our department store building?" Ethan's voice was stern, his sharp gaze sweeping over the trembling faces of the executives. But to his fury, the room was met with dead silence, except for a few audible gasps. Bang! The folder was slammed heavily onto the table. Ethan's eyes were practically shooting fire. "Cat, got your tongues now? How much money has the company invested in this project? And yet, we haven't even seen a shadow of construction starting. Do you all want to be fired?" All eyes shifted blame until they landed on the project manager. The poor, newly appointed project manager could only stammer in a very wronged tone, President Smith, we really have done our best. Everything is ready, but there's one stubborn holdout who refuses to move, and they're very difficult to deal with. A stubborn holdout? An image of that charming face flashed through Ethan's mind, and a wave of anger rose within him. HMPH, he had almost forgotten he had this hanging over her head. I'll handle this holdout. You all can assist with other projects for now. After giving his instructions, Ethan immediately drove to Aurora's little shop. Chapter 21. I'm not. Ethan pushed open the car door and gracefully stepped through the glass entrance, just in time to hear Aurora complaining to an unfamiliar short-haired woman, no water, no electricity. This is too much. Does Nantang have any shame? Chloe Green shook her head. Maybe the water and power are really out. Aurora stomped her foot in frustration. Impossible. I checked with the other shops this morning. They're all fine. Even the public phone booth next door has plenty of power. It's just my place. What a boss, what a company. Chloe sighed and started packing things up. Forget it, Aurora. If it comes to this, just let it go. There's no point in fighting them. After all, we can't beat Nantang. As Chloe left, Ethan walked in. Seeing his fake smile, Aurora's anger flared. What are you doing here again? Didn't I make myself clear the other day? Get out, Ethan smiled nonchalantly. I just heard you badmouthing someone as soon as I walked in. Why not beg me to restore your water and electricity? Beg you? Aurora sneered. I'd rather beg a dog than you. Ethan stepped forward and gently touched her chest. Then, under her furious gaze, he smiled flirtatiously. Really? But I wonder who was it that was about to kneel and beg me the other day. Aurora, both flustered and angry, covered her chest and yelled, I have a husband and a child. Can you not be so inappropriate? If you keep acting like a hooligan, I'll call the cops. How ridiculous. 5 years ago, she desperately begged him to want her, not to leave her. Now that he had reappeared, wanting to wantonly violate and play with her body, she would not allow it. Ethan's brow furrowed again. Whenever Aurora mentioned her husband, his heart churned with a turmoil of sadness. This suffocating feeling made him want to kill that husband of hers immediately. The more he cared, the more he pretended not to. He stepped forward and lifted her chin with a wicked grin. Well, name your terms. I heard the project manager couldn't accept your ridiculous demands. But as long as you spend one more night with me, I'll meet all your conditions. How about it? You, Aurora's eyes shot fire, so angry she wanted to grab a knife and stab this damned man. Do you think I'm a prostitute? I should have made it very clear. I love my husband very much and won't do anything to betray him, Aurora said, turning her face away coldly. Heh, why be so serious? We're all adults. All this talk of prostitutes is meaningless. Besides, 5 years ago, you were a prostitute, Ethan said contemptuously, tightening his grip on her chin and forcing her to look at him. Why be serious? Aurora couldn't help but laugh. As she laughed, tears streamed down her face. His casual tone pierced her deeply. Serious? Ethan Smith, don't you know I'm a person too? People have dignity, have bottom lines. The way you treated me so heartlessly back then. If it weren't for my child, I would have died long ago now. You still have the nerve to come here and say these things, do these things to me? Child. Chapter 22. Paternity test. Ethan keenly caught her every expression and asked with suspicion, Is Momo my daughter? From your tone, you really were pregnant back then. Aurora's face instantly turned pale. She blamed herself for getting carried away. Her eyes darted around as she said, No, she's not. Momo is not your child. Not to mention I wasn't pregnant back then, but even if I was, after falling out of a car like that, how could the child have survived? Aurora Gable, don't take me for a fool. I'll ask you one last time, is Momo my daughter? You should know the consequences of lying to me. Ethan's eyes were as terrifying and deep as if they were laced with poison. Aurora's face was filled with panic, and she shook her head violently. No, she's not your daughter, she's not. Ethan narrowed his eyes, staring intently at the woman who was clearly trying to cover something up. He was no naive young man who had never seen the world. After so many years in the business world, the truthfulness of her words was highly suspect. Just then, Momo walked in. Seeing Ethan, she happily called out, Uncle. Ethan scooped up Momo, and Aurora, almost instantly, rushed over like a madwoman, yelling, Let go of my daughter, let go. Momo has nothing to do with you. Momo is my daughter. She was on the verge of a breakdown. Momo was her last line of defense, the entire meaning of her life now, and the only thing she had left. If Ethan found out Momo was his daughter, he would definitely take her flesh and blood away. The thought of that possibility made Aurora feel like she was about to completely lose her mind. Ethan calmly watched the completely distraught Aurora in front of him. The more out of control she was, the more he suspected Momo's parentage. So, he decided to deliver one last, heavy blow. Holding Momo tightly, he dodged Aurora and said nonchalantly, "Whether she's my daughter or not, I can just take her for a paternity test right now. One needle prick, and we'll know everything." Hearing this, Aurora's face turned completely white. She lunged forward like a madwoman to snatch her daughter. At that moment, Momo, who had been relatively quiet in his arms, burst into tears and started struggling upon hearing about a needle. "No, I don't want a shot, Mommy. Save me. I don't want a shot." Ethan had no choice. Seeing Momo cry like that, he had to put her back in Aurora's arms. But he carefully observed Aurora's expression and demeanor, and the answer in his heart became even more certain. He turned to leave and happened to run into Julian, who was just returning. He gave Julian a meaningful look and left. Sitting in his car, he glanced one more time at the scene inside the glass door. Julian, caringly comforting the mother and daughter. The feeling in his heart grew even more sour. That was clearly his daughter. HMPH, so what if she was married? Marriages can end in divorce. His woman, his daughter, he would take them both back. But first, he had a very important matter to resolve. Ethan narrowed his eyes, took out his phone, and dialed a number. "We can start on that matter now. No need to show mercy. The woman who deceived me, used me for so many years, and was supported by me for so many years. It's time for it to end." Chapter 23. An outrageous demand on Sunday, Aurora, having instructed Chloe Green, who was at home, left for the shop. But halfway there, she was grabbed by two burly men, one on each side, and thrown into a car. A sweet scent wafted past her nose, and her body immediately went limp as she fainted. When she woke up, she found herself lying on a large black leather sofa. The surrounding decor was very luxurious. It was clearly a high-end office. Awake, a familiar voice sounded. Startled, Aurora looked behind her and saw Ethan sitting there with an amused expression, as if he had been there for a long time. Are you a pervert? You actually had me kidnapped. This is a society ruled by law, Ethan Smith. Aren't you being a bit too lawless?" Aurora said angrily as she straightened her clothes. Ethan walked over step by step, and by the time Aurora looked up, he had already trapped her between the wall and his chest. Aurora immediately panicked, placing her small hands on his chest and stammering, You stay away from me." Ethan's lips curved into a smile. He looked down at her cute, blushing face, grabbed her fidgeting hands, and planted a kiss on them. "Acting like this is just testing my patience." His breath fanned against her earlobe, which immediately turned bright red. "Ethan Smith, don't mess around. Why did you guys bring me here?" Aurora struggled with all her might, but she couldn't pull her hands back. "See, you still like it when I'm like this," Ethan said with a wicked smile. His roguish tone immediately snapped Aurora out of her daze. She bit down hard on his lip, and blood immediately seeped from between their lips. Ethan winced in pain, looking at her in disbelief, and said with some impatience, "What on earth are you doing?" "Let me tell you, Aurora Gable, the price you quoted to the project manager is simply preposterous. What do you think I brought you here for today? Aurora, there's a limit to making outrageous demands. Do you really think I won't get angry, that I'll let my project be delayed just for your whimsy?" Aurora, not to be outdone, glared back with fire in her eyes. "Ethan Smith, you say you brought me here to talk about this. Is this how you do it?" With that, she puffed out her chest, not caring about anything else, and stared at him defiantly. Ethan, however, was clearly captivated by the fair skin of her chest. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said meaningfully, "Actually, if you insist on that price to move, it's not impossible." "Really?" Aurora's eyes widened in disbelief. "Of course, it's true." Ethan smiled charmingly, and with a swift move, he pinned her restless hands, lifted her up, and tossed her onto the large, soft sofa. Aurora's face turned pale with fright. When Ethan pressed his entire body on top of her and began to indiscriminately strip her clothes, her face turned so red it could have bled. What are you doing? You can't do this is rape." Aurora was already babbling incoherently. On one hand, her body's reaction was completely natural and fluid. On the other, she wished she could kick the brute who kept preying on her to death. Chapter 24, I give you my body, what are you pretending for? Aurora Gable, why are you so slow? If you win me over and become Mrs. Smith, what won't be yours? Ethan said with a laugh, his hands moving deftly as he found time to gently tap her nose. Hearing the words, Mrs. Smith, Aurora froze for a moment, then said with contempt, bullshit. Isn't the title of Mrs. Smith already taken by someone else? The thought of Scarlett's disdainful face from before sent her heart plunging into an abyss. The stirring she had felt for Ethan moments ago vanished completely. She hadn't forgotten who had nearly killed her and Momo 5 years ago. Ethan noticed the sudden coldness from the woman beneath him. He sighed, reached out to cup her somber face, and said patiently, Scarlett and I are divorced. Then, seeing the clear disbelief in her expression, he got up reluctantly, walked to the desk, grabbed a document and tossed it onto the sofa. Here, see for yourself. A file landed squarely on her. She opened it and immediately covered her mouth in shock. The divorce agreement had been signed by both parties, and Scarlett's side had been certified as being mentally incompetent. What happened? How could she be mentally ill? Aurora looked at Ethan, confused. Scarlett had seemed perfectly fine when they met just a few days ago. HMPH, she got what she deserved, Ethan said with a dismissive shrug. That damn bitch Scarlett had been playing around outside for years. This time, she was actually beaten up on the street by another man's wife, hired thugs and all. It was what she deserved. Of course, the alimony he gave her was more than enough for her to squander. Looking at Ethan's heartless expression, Aurora's feelings were mixed. She had thought he was so in love with Scarlett, but it turned out he could discard her and divorce her just like that. No wonder he had been so cruel to her back then, even knowing she might be pregnant. At this thought, Aurora fought the urge to curse him out. She lay on the sofa, her tone indifferent. You just want my body, don't you? Go ahead. Ethan looked at the woman who had suddenly relaxed, her face a mask of indifference, and was puzzled. What done with the act? He asked with an amused smile, moving closer to continue undressing her. Aurora watched his movements with cold eyes and shook her head faintly. I've thought it through. My heart belongs to my husband, so since I can't avoid this, I'll just pretend I'm being bitten by a dog. But Ethan Smith, don't forget the price you promised me. I need that money to live a good life with my husband. As she spoke, a sweet smile even appeared on her lips. Ethan stared at the smile on her lips, his hands freezing. He gritted his teeth and asked in a chilling voice, What? You love your husband that much? So much that you'd use your own body to trade for money to please him? Aurora opened her eyes, trying her best to make her gaze radiate a brilliant, gentle light. Of course, I love him. I'd do anything for him. Good, good, very good. Ethan laughed, a laugh that sounded almost drunken. After laughing for a while, he looked down again, his gaze on Aurora now icy to the extreme. Under his stare, Aurora felt as if she could freeze into a block of ice in an instant. She opened her mouth to speak but held back, saying nothing. Chapter 25. No strength to resist, Aurora Gable, don't forget what you said today. For him, you'd do anything, right? Ethan's voice was like a pool of black, flowing water, gurgling into the depths of Aurora's heart. However, before Aurora could process the complex, uncomfortable feeling in her heart, Ethan had already swiftly and completely stripped her of her clothes. Ethan Smith, Aurora cried out in shock. But this time, Ethan was completely unaffected, as if he couldn't hear her shouts, as if he didn't care if the person beneath him was Aurora at all. Aurora stared at him in terror and helplessness, finally realizing that when he was serious, she had no chance of resisting at all. Completely ignoring the tears streaming down her pale face, he coldly dropped a sentence. I'll tell the project manager to meet all the conditions you mentioned. Then, he left the office without looking back. With the slam of the door, Aurora froze. Then, clutching her naked body in terror, she finally broke down, her sobs low and intermittent. Since seeing him again 5 years later, he had always seemed to want her, to be very interested in her. Even just now, when he said he had divorced Scarlett. Although Aurora had been trying her best to deny and refuse it, deep down, something she didn't want to admit was that she had indeed felt a moment of hesitation and expectation. Could it be that he still had feelings for her? Could it be that they could really get back together? After all, they even had a child between them. But everything that had just happened made it crystal clear to her. He didn't love her, and he never would. No matter what had happened between him and Scarlett, no matter if he possessed her body, to Ethan, she, Aurora Gable, was nothing more than a prostitute who had sold herself to him 5 years ago. Even if he was always provoking her now, wanting her, it was only because he still found her attractive, or perhaps her rejection had challenged his usual domineering and absolute sense of superiority. He could be interested in her, he could be annoyed and unwilling to accept it, but he could never love her. If he loved her, if he had even a shred of pity for her, he wouldn't have treated her like this, degraded her, hurt her like this. Having figured this out, Aurora stood up, numbly put on her clothes, and walked to the door to leave. But just as she opened it, she was hit hard by a small figure. Aurora grabbed the small figure that was about to fall. The child looked up. It was a very handsome little boy. As Momo's mother, Aurora had a soft spot for children, but the tenderness that had just begun to well up in her heart immediately turned to horror when she saw the boy's face clearly. This boy looked so much like Ethan. Chapter 26, Who are you with, who are you? Leo Smith asked, a smile on his face, but his expression was one of habitual arrogance. Aurora looked at the little boy with a complex expression. This was Ethan Smith's office in the Nanteng group, and this boy, who was practically a miniature version of Ethan, could only be one thing: Ethan's child. The thought sent a sharp pain through her heart. Leo looked at Aurora with contempt and, raising his small fists, began to hit her, shouting, "You must be the bad woman who seduced my daddy, a shameless bad woman. It's because of you that mommy can't come home, that mommy won't come to see me. Bad woman, go away, bad woman, I'll beat you to death." Aurora didn't fight back as he hit her. She didn't know how to refute any of his words. After all, she had just slept with Ethan, and she knew about his divorce from Scarlett. "What are you doing, Leo?" Ethan strode in from the doorway and grabbed his son's small hand. "Why are you being so rude?" he asked, frowning at his son. Leo angrily shook off his father's hand and pointed at Aurora, crying, "Daddy, did you divorce mommy because of this bad woman? Mommy said you don't want her anymore, so she can't be with me anymore. Daddy is bad, and this bad woman is even worse." Leo's childish words made Aurora feel even more ashamed. She didn't want to see this scene any longer. Covering her face, she rushed out of Nanteng. Ethan watched her retreating back with a complicated expression, but with his son there, he didn't chase after her. Running back home, Aurora was exhausted. She wearily opened the door, only to be greeted by an anxious Chloe and a guilt-ridden Julian. "What's wrong?" she asked, looking around but not seeing the lively little figure. Her heart tightened with a bad premonition. Julian lowered his head and sighed, seemingly unable to speak. Chloe glanced at him, then rubbed her hands guiltily and said to Aurora, "Aurora, don't panic. This is all Julian's fault. He got off work late today and didn't get to pick up Momo." "What?" Aurora almost fainted on the spot. Chloe quickly supported her swaying body and anxiously reassured her. It's okay. Momo should be fine. The teacher said she left with an uncle she knew. Momo is so smart, she definitely wouldn't go with a stranger. I'll go check with the neighbors and the shop owners we know. Maybe she's visiting someone." Hearing this, Aurora calmed down a little. "I know my daughter. She wouldn't just go with a stranger. It must have been someone she knew." As she spoke, her face pale, she was about to rush out the door when her phone suddenly rang. Aurora answered it nervously. "Mommy, why did you have Uncle pick me up? Mommy, why aren't you here yet? Momo misses you." Hearing Momo's sweet voice, Aurora's heart clenched. Damn it, what uncle? Could Momo have run into a bad person? "Momo, tell Mommy, who are you with right now?" Chapter 27. "I am your father, Aurora Gable. Come to my house immediately. You know where it is." A deep, unquestionable voice. Ethan Smith. Aurora was so shocked the phone almost slipped from her hand. "What are you doing? If you have a problem, come at me. Why did you kidnap my daughter?" "Ethan Smith, release my daughter immediately or I'm calling the police." "Heh, really?" Ethan on the other end laughed contemptuously, then said slowly, "Then go ahead and call the police. It'll be a good opportunity for me to get a paternity test. I now suspect you secretly gave birth to my daughter without telling me, her biological father. What do you think? Sound good?" You, for a celebrity like Ethan, if he told the police that Momo might be his daughter, even if it was just a possibility, Momo would be photographed by reporters. They would never have a peaceful life again. Aurora was so angry she couldn't say a word for a long time. Ethan seemed to guess her thoughts and added faintly, "Aurora, after today, I've run out of patience with you. Right now, I just want to find out about my daughter. Do whatever you want." Hearing this, Aurora's eyes widened in horror. She couldn't let him take Momo. He already had Leo. "I won't call the police, Ethan. I'm coming over right now. If you dare to do anything to my daughter, I'll die with you." With that, Aurora slammed down the phone, grabbed her bag, and rushed out the door, heading for Ethan's villa. Meanwhile, Momo, sitting on the sofa, her initial excitement having worn off, finally started to get scared after hearing the hostile tone between Ethan and her mother on the phone. "Uncle, why did you hang up?" "I want Mommy." As if on cue, her big eyes started to fill with tears. She looked at Ethan with a hint of panic. Seeing her pitiful state, Ethan quickly picked her up and placed her on his lap to comfort her. "Momo, be good. Your mommy will be here soon." But Momo looked at him, the tears in her big eyes welling up more and more, her mouth slowly turning down into a pout. Finally, the combination of anxiety and fear made her break down completely. "Wah. Mommy, I want Mommy. Uncle kidnapped me. I want Mommy." Now Ethan was at a loss. This little girl's mood changed so fast just a moment ago. She was all sweet smiles that could melt your heart, and now it was all storm clouds and a downpour. The cool, composed demeanor he had maintained with Aurora completely crumbled in the face of little Princess Momo. Ethan could only pull out a pile of dolls he had bought for her and try to coax her with a patient smile. "Momo, look at these dolls. Aren't they pretty? Aren't they cute?" But Momo completely ignored him, crying even louder. "Wah, Uncle is a bad guy. I must have been kidnapped. Wah." "What? A bad guy?" Ethan frowned, not liking his daughter calling him that. "Momo, I'm your daddy, not a bad guy," he said seriously, looking at her. He had to let her know his identity. Momo stopped crying and looked at him, then shook her head vigorously. "No, you're not my daddy. My daddy is Julian." That sentence finally ignited all of Ethan's jealousy. His expression became even more serious. "Momo, I am your daddy. That Julian is not. He's just your mommy's husband, not your daddy." Chapter 28. "Isn't daddy great?" Momo stared blankly at Ethan. Ethan realized his explanation was strange and sighed in frustration, but then he heard Momo ask, "So, are you my goddaddy?" "What goddaddy? I'm your daddy." Ethan was about to go crazy with anger. "But daddy is godmommy's husband, not mommy's husband," Momo said seriously, counting on her little fingers. "Momo, can you explain that more clearly? What do you mean daddy is godmommy's husband?" Ethan was completely baffled. Momo looked at him blankly. She didn't understand it herself. Ethan helplessly analyzed what his daughter had said and then asked, "Momo, do mommy and daddy sleep in the same room?" Momo shook her head. "No, daddy and godmommy sleep in one room and mommy and I sleep in another room." Ethan was stunned for a long moment, then, in a burst of joy, he lifted Momo high into the air. At that moment, he was 100% sure that little Princess Momo was his daughter. And she, Aurora, was clearly just his woman. Thinking of this, all his previous anger toward her vanished. This stubborn woman had been deceiving him all this time. "Giggle, uncle, put me down, Momo shrieked with a mix of laughter and tears as she was lifted high. But Ethan said, childishly and domineeringly, "No, I'll only put you down if you call me daddy." "God, daddy," Momo said seriously. In her little head, she had accepted Julian as daddy, so Ethan could only be god daddy. Ethan pouted, mimicking her. "That's not right. I am your daddy. From now on, you're not allowed to call anyone else daddy, understand?" Momo thought for a moment and asked childishly, "So, are you the kind of daddy who lives with mommy and me? I see other kids live with their mommy and daddy, but my daddy belongs to godmommy." Seeing his daughter's pitifully cautious expression, Ethan's heart ached. He quickly put her down and held her tightly. "From now on, Momo and mommy will live here with daddy. Our family of 3 will never be separated again." "Really?" Momo blinked her innocent eyes, looking at him with a joyful surprise. "Of course, it's true," Ethan said, planting a kiss on her little cheek. Little Momo's face lit up like the sun. Ding dong! The doorbell rang. Ethan smiled and said to his daughter, "Your mommy's here. Go open the door." Momo happily scampered off, but she couldn't reach the doorknob and could only shout to the person outside. "Mommy, mommy," hearing her daughter's voice. Aurora, who was outside, thought Ethan was mistreating her and shouted anxiously, "Ethan, open the door!" Ethan, hearing her mother's loud shouts, Momo turned to look at Ethan and stuck out her tongue. "Mommy is so fierce." In a great mood, Ethan deliberately called out to the door, "Who is it?" Aurora was so angry she almost kicked the door. "Stop playing dumb, who do you think it is? Didn't you want me to come?" "Open the door." Ethan then opened the door, and just as Aurora was about to rush to Momo, he scooped up his daughter. Momo, thinking her parents were playing, laughed and shouted, "Giggle, Mommy's silly. Mommy can't catch Daddy." Pleased with his daughter's praise, Ethan triumphantly planted a kiss on her cheek and asked, "Isn't Daddy great?" Chapter 29. Not as gentle as Mommy, Momo happily puckered her little lips and planted a kiss on her father's cheek, then answered sweetly, "Daddy is the best." Ethan, very pleased, grinned from ear to ear. "So, does Momo like Daddy?" "I do, of course I do," Momo replied cooperatively. Watching the father and daughter duo shamelessly showing off their affection, Aurora was completely dumbfounded. Since when did Momo start calling him Daddy? And her Momo was usually quite shy around strangers. How did she get so familiar with this stranger, Ethan, so quickly? It was infuriating. The little princess she had painstakingly raised for years had defected so quickly. Meanwhile, the father and daughter seemed to be addicted to it, calling each other Daddy and Sweetheart nonstop. Aurora couldn't take it anymore and roared, "Momo, don't call him that, he's not your daddy." Her words silenced the happy pair, who both turned to look at her with perfect synchronization. Ethan's face was filled with anger, his eyes reproaching her. Aurora was unfazed by his anger and glared back defiantly. But when she turned and met Momo's gaze, she was at a complete loss. Little Momo looked wronged and pitiful, as if she had truly lost her real father. This made Aurora's already complicated feelings even heavier. "Momo, you have a daddy, remember?" Aurora said, holding her daughter and comforting her in a gentle voice. But this explanation only resulted in a more intense look of grievance and an even more terrifying glare. Just as Ethan was about to lose his temper, he heard his daughter say in a pleading tone, "Daddy, are you really my daddy or not?" "Yes, of course I am," Ethan said affirmatively to Momo. Momo's gaze then drifted mournfully to her mother. Aurora looked at her daughter's pleading face with a mix of heartache and helplessness. But just as she was about to make a final stand, little Momo's expression changed to a fawning smile as she said sweetly, "Mommy, don't be mad at Daddy. Next time Daddy makes you unhappy, I'll help you hit him, okay? So let's forgive Daddy this time, okay?" Aurora's face was covered in dark lines. Who raised this thoughtless, black-hearted daughter? Ethan smiled triumphantly and deliberately leaned in to add, "Yeah, honey, just forgive me." Aurora was so angry she almost punched him. This wasn't a matter of forgiveness, it was about the two of them having a touching reunion that completely bypassed her. But seeing how happy Momo was, and the gentle light on Ethan's face that she had never seen before, Aurora's heart softened. "Is Momo really so happy to be with her daddy?" she asked quietly, her eyes welling up. Momo nodded vigorously. Aurora smiled through her tears. Momo immediately rushed over in a panic. "Mommy, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Are you still angry?" Ethan smiled gently. He knew Aurora was starting to accept him. He said slyly to Momo, "Okay, Mommy is just jealous. She's jealous of Daddy." Little Momo, wise beyond her years, immediately understood that her mother was jealous and started laying on the charm. "Mommy, Momo likes Daddy, but Momo loves Mommy the most. Daddy isn't as pretty as Mommy, not as gentle as Mommy, not as—" Oh no, she couldn't think of any more words. Momo's big eyes darted around for a few seconds, then she nodded seriously and added, "Not as soft as Mommy." Chapter 30, Stole My Daddy. Aurora's face immediately turned bright red. Who taught this girl to say such things? Ethan, however, had a triumphant smile on his face. He narrowed his eyes and said to Momo with a mischievous glint, "Momo, sweetie, you stay here in the living room and watch some cartoons. Daddy and Mommy have some business to take care of in the room." The moment Momo heard cartoons, she immediately plopped down on the sofa. Before Aurora could even protest, she was pulled into the room by Ethan, her face flushed red. "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" Momo is still in the living room. Aurora struggled to push away his wandering, misbehaving hands, but for every one she pushed away, another took its place. Soon, All she could do was gasp for breath. Ethan, with a wicked smile, leaned in and kissed her. Unable to resist the stimulation, Aurora found herself sinking deeper and deeper. Just as Ethan, satisfied with her reaction, took a deep breath and was about to undress her, a sudden cry came from the living room. Startled, Aurora's eyes flew open. They both hastily straightened their clothes and ran to the living room. Ethan, running ahead, reached the living room in just a few long strides. As soon as he got to the doorway, a small figure crashed into him. "Daddy, Daddy," Momo wailed. "What's wrong?" Aurora, who had caught up, anxiously asked her daughter in Ethan's arms. "Who's your daddy? Who's your daddy?" Another small figure rushed over, aggressively trying to pull Momo away. Seeing it was his son, Ethan's handsome face showed a hint of embarrassment. But when he saw Leo pulling Momo and making her cry even louder, he pushed his son away out of concern. "Momo, are you okay?" Ethan carefully shielded the little girl in his arms. Leo sat on the floor, stunned, watching his father fuss over Momo. He immediately felt wronged, his big eyes blinking as his mouth turned down. "Daddy, whose daddy are you? Why is she calling you daddy too?" Ethan frowned at his son, momentarily at a loss for words. Seeing Leo's expression, Aurora felt a pang of sympathy and went to help him up. She was about to comfort him when Leo bit her hand hard. "Ah," Aurora couldn't help but cry out. "Bad woman, you stole my daddy." Leo's fierce little face made Aurora feel even worse. Seeing her mother get bitten, Momo immediately wriggled out of Ethan's arms and ran to her mother, kissing and blowing on the bite. Ethan grabbed Leo and scolded him. "Leo, what's gotten into you? Who taught you to bite people?" Seeing his father scold him while being so nice to that little girl made Leo feel even more wronged. Finally, he too burst into tears. Now Ethan was in an even more awkward position. He stood there helplessly, looking at Leo. Although he was his son, he had always believed that boys shouldn't be coddled. Plus, his relationship with Scarlett had always been strained, so neither of them had paid much attention to their son. Now he didn't even know how to interact with him. Chapter 31, I Don't Love You at All. Aurora looked up and saw Ethan just standing there, as if contemplating whether to hug Leo. Her heart ached, and she walked over. "You take Momo, I'll handle this." Leo initially wanted to resist when he saw Aurora, but this pretty auntie had a gentleness that even his own mother lacked. And now, feeling like he had lost his father too, he was extremely insecure. So, without much thought, he let Aurora carry him to the room. When Aurora came out again, Momo was asleep on the sofa. Ethan walked over and looked at her questioningly. "Leo cried himself to sleep," she said, her expression flat. Just as Ethan breathed a sigh of relief, he saw her turn to pick up Momo and leave. He quickly grabbed her, pulled her into the room, and then, finally able to speak freely, asked, "What's wrong with you? You were fine just now, why are you leaving all of a sudden?" Aurora kept her head down, her expression hidden. Her low voice came out, "This is your home, not mine. Momo's asleep, I should take her home." Ethan frowned, losing his patience. "What's this, your home, my home? From now on, you and Momo will live here. Momo is my daughter. We're not going to be separated again." "That's impossible. Momo is not your daughter, Ethan. You're overthinking it." Aurora still kept her head down, as if she couldn't bear to look at him. "What nonsense are you talking about? Momo is my daughter, there's no doubt about it." "You're still talking nonsense at a time like this?" Finally losing his temper, Ethan lifted her chin, forcing her to look up. He froze. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes filled with sadness and helplessness. He immediately felt a pang of regret and panic, shaking her shoulders. "What's wrong? What happened? Did Leo say something to upset you?" "He's just a child, don't take it seriously." Aurora shook her head, and as she did, she started to laugh. A cold, tear-stained smile that pierced Ethan's heart. "Yes, Leo is just a child. And come to think of it, he's a year younger than Momo." "Ethan, do you really have the heart to see him so sad?" Confused, Ethan held her tighter. "He's my son, of course I don't want him to be sad, but that doesn't stop us from giving Momo a home." "Give Momo a home?" Aurora's lips curved into a faint smile, as if she had heard a joke. Her expression was enough to make Ethan want to kill someone. "Ethan, why bother? You've played the role of the doting, self-deceiving father for long enough. Do you have to wait until you're tired of it to kick me and my daughter out? Do you have any idea what you're saying?" Ethan's brow furrowed tightly. Her words were accusing him of a cruel crime. Her breathing became rapid. She forcefully broke free from his grasp. Isn't it true? You talk about giving Momo a home, but I don't love you at all, and you don't love me at all. Look at the harm you and Scarlett have caused, Leo. I don't want my Momo to be that sad one day, so please, let us go. Don't bother me anymore. I really don't hate you anymore. I just want to raise Momo well, that's all. I don't love you at all. You don't love me at all. Aurora's words were like a pair of scissors, snipping away at the happiness that had just begun to bloom in Ethan's heart. Long after she had left with Momo, he stood silently in the empty living room, clutching his left chest, where the dull ache still lingered. She had left again. What could he do? That woman, Aurora, was like a poison. If he were to tell her now that he actually loved her, would she believe him? He missed the Aurora from 5 years ago, the one who had wholeheartedly begged him not to leave. Whatever her reasons were back then, he was now willing to pay any price to hear her say it one more time, that she couldn't live without him, that she loved him. Chapter 32. Ethan's in trouble on Sunday afternoon. Aurora decided to take a day off and didn't open the shop. It was a rare weekend, and Chloe and Julian had gone out early for a date. Aurora found the quiet time alone with her daughter to be quite peaceful. On the balcony, as Aurora was teaching Momo to read, she suddenly heard arguing from the living room. Startled, she ran out to see Ethan and Leo glaring at each other, both looking displeased. "Ethan Smith, what's going on? How did you get into my house?" Aurora's eyes widened in shock. Since their last argument, she hadn't seen him for several days and had enjoyed some peace and quiet. Ethan shrugged nonchalantly and dangled a key from his hand. "I had a copy made when I dropped you off before." "You?" Aurora was speechless with anger. She was used to Ethan acting like a perfectly reasonable gangster. With a deep sigh, she was about to kick him out when she saw him push a reluctant Leo forward. "I have to go to the US on a business trip for a few days starting tomorrow. Leo is staying here." "What?" Aurora exclaimed. How could that be? Seeing Aurora's shocked expression and Momo's unhappy glare, Leo became even more unwilling. He started to throw a tantrum, shouting, "Daddy, I don't want to stay here, I want to go home. I want to go home." Ethan frowned, glanced at his watch, and realized he was running late. He shoved Leo into the arms of the stunned Aurora and rushed out the door. By the time Aurora came to her senses and dragged Leo out to chase after him, Ethan was long gone. For the next few days, Aurora felt like a supermom. Not only did she have no time to open the shop, but just staying at home all day was enough to keep her busy. After a long week, Ethan finally called. Aurora was as thrilled as if she were seeing the Virgin Mary. She yelled into the phone, "Ethan Smith, you're finally back," but the voice on the other end was an unfamiliar man's. "Hello, is this Miss Aurora Gable?" Stunned, Aurora composed herself and said hesitantly, "Yes, may I ask who this is?" "I'm the business manager at Nantang. The thing is, our president is dealing with some matters in the US, so I may need to come and pick you and the children up later. Could you please pack some things?" "What?" Something happened. Aurora's mind went blank, her breathing almost stopping. What happened to Ethan? She tried to control her emotions, but her voice was trembling. The business manager on the other end spoke again. "Miss Gable, please don't worry for now. I can't disclose the specifics, but you'll know when you get here. Enough, don't give me this vague nonsense. Just tell me what happened to Ethan." Aurora was shouting now, surprising even herself. But at this moment, her entire heart was in a knot, and she couldn't control her emotions. The business manager seemed to hesitate before saying, "We came to the US this time for the review of a new RD program. But when we got there, we found that the program had been stolen. And in the process of investigating, the other party actually..." Chapter 33, "You do love me, stop talking. I'll pack our things right now. Come and get us immediately." With that, Aurora hung up. She clutched her chest. She had desperately wanted to know what had happened to Ethan, but hearing the business manager's words, she was suddenly terrified. The next second, she frantically rushed into the room, rapidly packing while muttering to herself, "Ethan, you have to be okay. You bastard, you treated me so heartlessly before, and now you're thinking of abandoning both kids to me. No way, you can't be that selfish," as she spoke. And by the time she had finished packing and sat down on the sofa, she was surprised to find her face streaked with tears. By noon the next day, after a long journey, Aurora finally arrived with the 2 children at the hotel where Ethan was staying. Following the business manager up the stairs, her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would leap out of her chest. At the door, she knocked gently, but there was no answer. The business manager then used a key card and went straight in. Aurora followed hesitantly, only to find the room empty. At that moment, the tears she had held back for so long finally burst forth. Crying, she sobbed, "Ethan, you can't be hurt. You can't leave me. You can't leave the children." However, the moment she pushed open one of the room doors, she fell into a warm embrace. Then, a teasing voice sounded from above her head. "So, that's what you think of me." Ethan looked amusedly at the little woman in his arms, her eyes red from crying. Aurora, who had been overwhelmed with grief, immediately came to her senses and tried to push him away, but she couldn't break free. In frustration, she bit him. Wow, Momo and Leo stared, wide-eyed and stunned. Seeing the two kids' reaction, Ethan finally let go of Aurora and turned to instruct the business manager to take the children to play somewhere else. Seeing the children being led away, Aurora sensed trouble and was about to follow, but Ethan pulled her back into his arms, and she fell onto the bed. "Ah," she couldn't help but exclaim. Ethan, clearly enjoying himself, leaned in and kissed her. Although she was furious, her body honestly longed for his touch. When everything had calmed down, Ethan, lying on top of her, said with emotion, "Aurora, actually, you do love me. You were lying to me before." Aurora looked into his eyes, and after confirming that he was serious, she said hesitantly, "What about Leo?" Ethan stroked her head and smiled faintly. "Didn't you notice that Leo wasn't unhappy just now?" Aurora's eyes darted around. It was true. Even when she had bitten Ethan like that, Leo hadn't reacted much, instead looking like he was watching a show. "Actually, for Leo, you would definitely be a better mother," Ethan said gently. Moved, Aurora rested her head on his chest, tears silently falling. Feeling the warm liquid, Ethan immediately looked down and asked nervously, "What's wrong? Why are you crying again?" Chapter 34. "Will you marry me?" Seeing his nervous expression, Aurora laughed. "I just can't believe it. When I left with Momo 5 years ago, I never dreamed this day would come." Hearing this, Ethan let out a slow breath and gently tapped her on the head. "Silly woman, I haven't even started proposing and you're already crying." Aurora looked up blankly. Ethan smiled dotingly, then suddenly half-knelt on the bed and from somewhere produced an exquisite box. "Aurora Gable, will you marry me?" His voice was gentle and deep, like a distant bell on a slightly tipsy night. Aurora looked with emotion at the dazzlingly brilliant ring in the box in his hand. Then, through tears and laughter, she nodded. A week after returning to the country, Aurora sat in the dressing room, staring in amazement at the woman in the mirror. She never thought she could be this beautiful, this radiant 5 years. Looking back at the nightmarish days of 5 years ago, she had never dared to hope that one day Ethan would propose to her. Back then, she was too weak. Her world revolved only around him. She could only kneel humbly on the ground, her pride crushed to dust, begging him to let her stay by his side. But now, everything was different. They had children and they had love, and she was no longer the Aurora of the past. She had the ability and pride to support herself, and she had her dignity. Thinking of Ethan's proposal, Aurora couldn't help but lower her head, her face blushing as she smiled like a lily. "What? Are you that happy?" A cold, mocking voice sounded. Startled, Aurora looked up at the mirror. Behind her, Scarlett stood with her hands on her hips, a look of contempt on her face. The makeup artist was nowhere to be seen. "What are you doing here?" Aurora turned her head, her expression souring. Scarlett sneered. Yes, I shouldn't be here at your wedding. But Aurora, I just don't understand how you can be so shameless. What, are you so happy, so proud to have stolen someone's husband and destroyed someone's family?" Scarlett's words hit a nerve. Aurora's face turned completely grim. "Scarlett, do you think I'm still the naive girl I was 5 years ago? You and your mother can put away your act. It doesn't work on me anymore. If we're talking about stealing husbands, I was Ethan's woman back then. It was you who used tricks to seduce my man." Surprised by Aurora's comeback, Scarlett's face quickly darkened, a strange smile playing on her lips. Aurora, do you really think you can just enjoy the fruits of the happiness you stole from me?" "I'm telling you, it's impossible." Aurora frowned impatiently at Scarlett's crazed, terrifying expression. "What on earth are you trying to do? If you keep causing trouble, I'll call security." Her serious warning was met with even more rampant laughter from Scarlett. Go ahead, call them. If you call Ethan, you'll miss your chance to find out how your father died." Aurora froze. "Father? She shot up from her chair, rushed over, and grabbed Scarlett's shoulders, her eyes murderous. "What are you talking about? What are you scheming now? That you would even bring up Dad's death? Didn't he commit suicide?" Chapter 35. Killed Dad. Seeing that she had achieved the desired effect, Scarlett smiled triumphantly. "My dear sister, your father is my father too. How could I possibly lie? Dad did indeed commit suicide, but do you know why?" Aurora's face was as white as her wedding dress. She shook her head nervously, her eyes fixed on Scarlett's heavily lipsticked mouth, hanging on every word. That beautiful mouth curved into a wicked, cruel smile. "Dad was driven to his death by the then president of Nantang, your beloved Ethan's father." Aurora froze, her body trembling violently. She shook her head frantically. "Impossible. You're lying. You're just saying that to stop me from marrying Ethan, right?" Scarlett forcefully pushed away Aurora's hands. Pushed off balance, Aurora stumbled and fell to the ground, looking up at her with vacant eyes. "Aurora, do you think I have the time to fight with you over Ethan? He's just a cast-off I'm done with. You can have him. I just came to tell you the truth, since we're both Dad's daughters. Did you think it was a coincidence that you met Ethan on your very first day at the bar? And did you think it was so easy for me to seduce him? Ha 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 ha. That's because my mom, and I knew long ago why Dad died. So we had already investigated everything about Ethan." With that, Scarlett bent down triumphantly and pinched Aurora's pale, bloodless face. "Now, Aurora, I'd like to know, what will you do? Marry him. Act like nothing ever happened. Ha ha ha." Aurora stared blankly as Scarlett's swaying figure left the dressing room. She couldn't come to her senses for a long time, a buzzing sound filling her ears. By the time the makeup artist returned and everything was ready, she was standing on the stage, watching Ethan slowly walk toward her. But her heart was bleeding, drop by drop. She couldn't help but smile self-deprecatingly. It seemed she was not destined for happiness after all. Dad, the father who had doted on her since she was a child. 6 years ago, the same year she met Ethan, he had suddenly jumped from a building. When she rushed home from school and saw his bloodied, mangled face under the white sheet, it was the most heartbreaking moment of her life. Ethan had reached her, but there was no longer any smile in Aurora's eyes. She hated him. She had never hated him as much as she did at this moment. More than 5 years ago, when he abandoned her, when he forced her to have an abortion. Now, she hated him the most. The officiant was already saying, "The bride and groom will now exchange rings." Ethan had taken out the ring, but Aurora's hand, without any warning, suddenly pulled back from his. He looked up at her in surprise. Her eyes were filled with an icy determination. She couldn't be so selfish as to disregard her father's spirit in heaven for her own happiness. Aurora looked at Ethan and said, word by word, "Actually, I never wanted to marry you, Ethan Smith." Then, without looking at him again, she used all her strength to walk, step by step, firmly out of the wedding venue. Ethan stood on the stage, his face ashen, watching her figure disappear through the doorway, unable to say a word. Chapter 36. Occupied his heart, he clutched the ring he was about to give her so tightly that it dug into his flesh and drew blood. The sharp pain served as a reminder that what had just happened was nothing short of a joke. Only now did he realize that it was all for revenge. Her sweet and lovely demeanor these past few days had all been an act for this moment of retaliation. She still hated him for his cruelty and heartlessness back then. And what he had thought was a chance to finally be together, to put the past behind them, was just his own wishful thinking. For the first time in his life, he had laid his entire heart bare and offered it to this woman. But she had so easily, so cruelly, so unhesitatingly crushed it under her foot. He didn't care about the mocking eyes of the guests below. He only knew that his happiness, the life he thought had finally settled down just a moment ago, had been brutally torn to shreds by this woman, Aurora. Below the stage, everyone stared in shock at the scene unfolding. No one could understand why someone would be unwilling to marry Nantang's Ethan Smith, and to choose to run away from the wedding in front of everyone. This was deliberately throwing his face on the ground to be trampled. Among the crowd, a cold smile appeared on Scarlett's lips. Beside her stood Aurora's stepmother, her face also showing a triumphant grin. She turned to her daughter and said, "You're really something. You actually managed to ruin this wedding." Scarlett looked at Ethan on the stage with disdain and laughed. "You can only blame Aurora for being stupid." "Heth, I just made up a story about Dad being driven to his death by Nantang, and she actually believed it. It's hilarious. Dad was clearly pushed by you, Mom, but she still doesn't know. Aurora's stepmother pursed her lips. It's not my fault that old fool happened to see me with your real father back then. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to push him. Scarlett nonchalantly led her mother away. She didn't care about the old man she had no blood relation to, nor did she care about Aurora's wedding. But she wouldn't accept it either. Why should that bitch Aurora take away her husband and her son? Even if she didn't love Ethan and didn't care much for Leo, Ethan was still a cash cow, and she was very unwilling to let him go. If it weren't for Aurora's appearance, Ethan would never have divorced her. At this thought, she gritted her teeth, her eyes holding a neurotic terror. Aurora, the show is not over yet. Don't think it's that simple. She turned to look at Ethan one more time. It was unrealistic to say she wasn't moved by such an outstanding man. But no matter what she did in these 5 years, had he ever truly tried to understand her? On the few occasions they had sex while he was drunk, he had called out that bitch Aurora's name. She was mad with rage and jealousy. Aurora, why did she get to occupy Ethan's heart? Why did she get to occupy her husband's heart? Scarlett's gaze grew even more terrifying. Ethan Smith, since I can't have you, I'll destroy you. I'll destroy you, and I won't let Aurora have you either. Chapter 37. The children are kidnapped. Leaving the venue, Aurora felt as if all her strength had been drained in that one moment. Today, which was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, had turned into the most terrifying nightmare. She couldn't help but smile self-deprecatingly. Perhaps they were just not meant to be together. She couldn't have him 5 years ago, and she couldn't have him now. In just one short hour, she was back to having nothing. All she had left was her daughter. Yes, she still had Momo. At this thought, Aurora rushed home. Because there were so many reporters and media at the wedding, she and Ethan had decided it was best not to bring the children. But as soon as she reached her front door, she was stunned by the scene before her. The door was open. She clutched her chest, a sense of unease washing over her as she stepped inside. The house was a mess, and both children were gone. The nanny they had hired was unconscious on the floor. Aurora anxiously shouted for the children, "Momo, Leo, where are you?" There was no response. After shouting for a full 10 minutes, she finally heard a small, terrified voice. "Auntie, I'm here." Overjoyed, Aurora turned around and saw Leo cautiously peeking out from the living room storage closet. She ran over and hugged him, stroking his red, dirty face as she asked anxiously, "Where's Momo? What happened?" Held in Aurora's arms, Leo was still trembling. At the mention of Momo's name, he finally broke down and burst into tears. His crying made Aurora's heart ache with fear. "It's okay, Auntie's back now. Don't be afraid. Tell me what happened." Leo looked up timidly at her, his eyes wide with fear, and sobbed, "Some bad men came. They knocked out the nanny and took Momo." Clang, Aurora's mind went blank, a buzzing sound filling her ears. Momo had been taken. If she hadn't been holding Leo, she might have fainted. Who could it be? Who took Momo? Frantic, she didn't know what to say. Suddenly, she looked at Leo in her arms. Why was Momo taken, but Leo was fine? She quickly grabbed him and asked anxiously, "Leo, tell Auntie, why did they only take Momo? Did you hide?" Leo shook his head in terror. "Momo and I were together, but the bad men only took her. They didn't take me." Aurora froze. They deliberately didn't take Leo. For some reason, the image of Ethan flashed through her mind. She ran away from the wedding, humiliated him as revenge, so he sent people to kidnap Momo. She let go of Leo, her hands trembling as she took out her phone to call Ethan. "The user you have dialed is currently unavailable." The robotic female voice completely shattered her last shred of reason. "Damn Ethan, to do something like taking Momo. I'll call the police, I'll call the police," Aurora chanted over and over, her hands shaking as she dialed 911. But just as she was about to press the call button, her phone rang. Her hand trembled as she answered. "Is this Miss Aurora Gable?" a man's voice asked. Chapter 38. So it was you. Aurora had no patience at the moment, and was about to hang up when the person on the other end said, "I think you'd like to know where your daughter is right now." Aurora froze, then gripped the phone tightly. "Where is my daughter? Who are you?" The strange man chuckled. "If Miss Gable comes to the address I'm about to send you, you'll naturally see your daughter. But if you call the police, or if anyone else follows you, don't blame us for being rough." With that, the call ended. Aurora stared at her phone screen in fear. 2 minutes later, a text message arrived. She opened it, read it, and immediately rushed out. On a highway outside the city, Ethan, reeking of alcohol, was driving at a breakneck speed, quickly exceeding 120 mph. He had deliberately opened the sunroof. The cold wind howled around his ears and above his head, as if only the physical chill could balance the coldness in his heart. But gradually, no matter how fast he drove, no matter how cold and strong the wind was, Aurora's face, her pale little face, her clear black and white eyes appeared before him, a cold and heartless expression floating in and out of view. Ha ha, Ethan laughed in a daze. The pain in his heart was numb, a dull ache, as if something inside him had shattered. The whole world swayed in the slightly intoxicated, cold wind. The high beams of an oncoming car flashed, and his thoughts scattered. He closed his eyes. It would be better to die than to feel this pain. But just for 2 seconds, he remembered he still had Leo and Momo to take care of. He opened his eyes, grabbed the steering wheel, and tried to swerve to avoid the oncoming vehicle. But the other car continued to press forward. Ethan's eyes turned cold. That car had its high beams on and was aiming for the perfect angle to hit him. It was clearly intentional. Bang! The car spun out of control and slammed into the guardrail. Against the airbag, Ethan, his face covered in blood, was completely unconscious. At this time of night, there were hardly any cars on the highway. The other vehicles stopped, and 2 tall, burly men got out. They walked over to Ethan's car and, with a cold sneer, pulled the unconscious Ethan from the wreckage. Meanwhile, Aurora arrived at the designated location and rushed into the dilapidated factory, only to see Scarlett standing inside with a charming smile. And sleeping in a chair was her Momo. Several men in black stood beside her. Aurora stopped in her tracks. So it was you. Looking at Scarlett's triumphant smile, Aurora suddenly thought of how she had believed it was Ethan's doing and felt a pang of guilt. But at the same time, it made sense. No wonder those men had only taken Momo and left Leo untouched. Scarlett couldn't help but laugh out loud. My dear sister, did you really not think it was me? Seeing you so surprised, I actually find your stupidity quite amusing. Aurora bit her lip. Yes, she found her own stupidity amusing too. Just now, she had been so sure it was Ethan and hadn't even considered Scarlett. She looked at Scarlett's beautifully made-up face and clenched her fists. It seemed she still didn't know this half-sister of hers very well. Scarlett, what did you take Momo for? Aurora asked anxiously, looking at the still, sleeping Momo, not knowing what was wrong with her. Scarlett sneered, a vicious light in her eyes. What for? Aurora, you're ridiculous. You still don't know why I took your daughter. Chapter 39, It's better if he dies. Why? Is it because of Ethan? I didn't marry him. What more do you want? Aurora shouted anxiously, but Scarlett just laughed even more happily. She was about to say something when her phone rang. After hanging up, she walked gracefully toward Aurora. Want to see Ethan? I just found out he was in a car accident. What? Aurora was struck by lightning, her face instantly turning deathly pale. But seeing Momo, she worried that Scarlett would involve the child because of Ethan. She forced herself to say, he and I have nothing to do with each other anymore. He killed my father. I don't care if he lives or dies. Ha 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 ha. To her surprise, Scarlett laughed even more happily. She stared at Aurora as if she were an animal caught in a trap. Aurora, you're so stupid I'm starting to like you. With that, she reached out her hand, her fingers coated in thick nail polish, and drew a line across Aurora's unmade-up face, then pressed down hard. A sharp pain on her cheek, the feeling of blood trickling down. Aurora dug her nails into her palms, the matching pain the only thing that kept her from moving. Looking at Momo behind her, she was so anxious she was on the verge of tears. Scarlett, what do you want from me? But Scarlett slowly shook her head. I don't need anything from you. Guess what? Ethan will be here soon, then you'll know what to do. Aurora frowned in unease. What do you mean? Scarlett turned away without answering. After a while, a few more men came, dragging Ethan's body in. Oh my God, what happened? Aurora covered her mouth and couldn't stop herself from walking over. Ethan was covered in dirt, his face and body covered in small cuts. He was unconscious. What happened to him? Aurora asked, stroking his face while looking up at Scarlett anxiously. A car accident, Scarlett said nonchalantly, barely glancing at him. A car accident? How could he have been in a car accident? Aurora took out her phone as if to call for an ambulance. Scarlett watched her and said in a flat, indifferent tone, "What? Don't you care about your daughter's life?" Aurora's hand froze, and her phone fell to the ground. The sound of it hitting the floor seemed to startle Ethan. His brow furrowed in his unconscious state, as if he were about to wake up. Aurora looked in agony at the still sleeping Momo, then at Ethan on the ground. She looked at Scarlett with pleading eyes. "Scarlett, you can hate me, I don't care what happens to me, but you don't want Ethan to die, do you?" "Do I?" "Aurora, you're so stupid it's impressive." A look of contempt and resentment crossed Scarlett's face. How could such a foolish and easily manipulated woman have won Ethan's affection? Scarlett walked over to Momo and, while gently stroking her adorable little face, said to Aurora with a wicked tone, "Your daughter or Ethan, who is more important to you?" Scarlett spoke slowly, but Aurora's heart was pounding with anxiety. Looking at the unconscious Ethan, she steeled herself, turned her head away, and said through gritted teeth, "Ethan has nothing to do with me now. He's the one behind my father's death." "How can he compare to my daughter?" Scarlett smiled. "Really? If he has nothing to do with you, why were you in such a hurry to call for help? If he's your enemy, wouldn't it be better to watch him die?" Chapter 40. What are you talking about, die? Watch him die. Aurora's heart skipped another beat. Did Scarlett really have such plans? Or was she just testing her, tormenting her? Even knowing that Ethan was the one who drove her father to jump, even with all her resentment, she could never bring herself to watch him die. No, she couldn't do it. She couldn't. Aurora's voice trembled. Even if he were a stranger, it would be too cruel to just stand by and watch him die. "Cruel?" Scarlett sneered. "My dear kind sister, if you think this is cruel, what will you do when things get even crueler?" "You? What do you mean?" Aurora asked, her heart pounding with fear. Scarlett narrowed her eyes, her smile vanishing, replaced by a look of extreme cruelty. "See that knife on the ground? Pick it up." Aurora followed Scarlett's finger and saw a dagger on the ground. She moved her lips to speak, but meeting Scarlett's gaze, she fell silent. She obediently walked over and picked up the knife. With Momo in Scarlett's hands, how could she dare to hesitate? Scarlett watched her movements and nodded in satisfaction, then her eyes turned cold. "Stab it into Ethan's chest." "What did you say?" Aurora's whole body trembled, the knife almost slipping from her grasp. "You want me to kill him?" She stared at Scarlett in disbelief. Not a trace of a smile remained on Scarlett's face. She roared, "Aurora, my patience is limited. Hurry up, otherwise I can't guarantee my hand won't." Slip. As she spoke, Scarlett placed her hand on Momo's slender neck. Aurora shuddered. For Momo, she had no choice. With great difficulty, she turned and walked, step by step, toward Ethan. As if sensing her presence, Ethan, who had been unconscious, woke up at that moment. He opened his eyes groggily and saw Aurora's tear-streaked face. His heart ached. But the tears and despair on her face became more vivid as his vision cleared. His heart clenched, and he spoke in a weak, hoarse voice. "You!" He said one word and then stopped, a self-deprecating smile on his lips. In just one night, everything had changed. They had gone from lovers about to be married to the most familiar of strangers, unable to even speak a word to each other. Aurora looked into his eyes, her own heart a mess of pain. What did he want to say? Did he not know yet that she was here to kill him? "What are you waiting for?" Scarlett's impatient voice urged from behind. Startled, Aurora didn't dare to look back at Momo. She walked straight to Ethan's side and knelt down. Only then did Ethan see the dagger in her hand. His eyes widened in shock and confusion. Aurora gripped the dagger tightly and asked him, "Why? Why did you drive my father to his death?" Ethan frowned. The pain in his body was already exhausting him, but the drunkenness he felt completely vanished when he saw the tears in her eyes. "What on earth are you talking about?" He struggled to sit up, looked at her, and then around the room. He immediately started to piece things together. This must have something to do with the hysterically laughing Scarlett over there. Chapter 41. This is the truth, Ethan Smith. Enough, are you still going to lie to me at a time like this? Aurora shouted, on the verge of a breakdown. She was being driven mad. She didn't want to kill him either, but she couldn't ignore Momo's safety. In the end, it was all his fault, all because of him. "Ethan, it's all your fault, all of it. If only I had never met you," she cried in despair. The words "never met you" completely broke Ethan's heart. He let out a self-deprecating laugh. "I drove your father to his death? Hess, so that's why you ran away from the wedding. You destroyed everything I wanted to give you. Aurora, you're right, it's all me. Heh. In the end, you, Aurora, never once thought to trust me, did you? You'd rather believe what Scarlet says than even ask me. Ha 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 ha. Scarlet's laughter was neurotic, almost insane. She savored their pain. At this moment, only their suffering could save her inexplicably empty soul. Stab him, don't you want your daughter anymore? Daughter? Her daughter Aurora's hand trembled violently. It seemed the men in black were already moving toward Momo. She had no choice. She looked at the weak, unconscious Ethan on the ground, finally steeled herself, and plunged the knife in. In agony, Ethan kept his eyes open, staring at her. He was in a daze, almost believing it was a dream. He watched clearly as the woman he loved with all his being ended his life with her own hands. One more step, pull it out. Scarlet's voice seemed to be right next to her ear. Aurora met his gaze, and with the cold, tragic expression of someone going to their execution, she bent down again and pulled the knife out. Ethan watched this in disbelief. The blood, the pain, none of it mattered. He looked at her actions with despair and resignation, a self-mocking smile on his lips. No matter how much the wound hurt, it couldn't compare to the pain in his heart. In the end, she never trusted him. She would rather believe Scarlet than him. She hadn't even asked him. Aurora, you really are something. After saying this, he closed his eyes, sinking into a deep pain and losing consciousness. But in the final second before he passed out, his fingers strangely moved into his pocket. The knife fell to the ground with a clatter. Aurora clutched her chest, closed her eyes, and then opened them again. She had killed him. Scarlet slowly walked over, her hand resting on Aurora's trembling shoulder. You did very well. And because you were so obedient, I'll tell you something. Guess what? You and I were not related by blood at all. Numbly, Aurora turned her head, her eyes wide and unfocused as she stared at Scarlet, not understanding what she meant. Scarlet smiled seductively. That's all thanks to my clever mother. I have a different father, you see. Heh, and also, your useless father, that old fool, was thrown off the building by my father. Ha 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 ha. Scarlet laughed triumphantly, tears almost streaming down her face. She had just orchestrated such a ridiculous event. She had watched with her own eyes as Aurora killed Ethan. Why was it that everything she wanted was taken by Aurora? What she couldn't have, that bitch Aurora would never have either. Chapter 42. Get rid of them, all a buzzing sound filled her ears, yet the world was quieter than ever before. Aurora covered her ears, her eyes wide open. For a moment, her senses seemed to have lost control. She didn't know what to do to make everything that had just happened a dream. Ethan! She reached out to him in a daze, but he didn't move. He lay there, weak, his face covered in sweat and dirt, but even that couldn't hide his handsome features. He seemed to be just asleep, but his body was covered in red, his white shirt stained with blood. Aurora's tears fell like broken pearls, one after another, without her even realizing it. She had never been so scared. She was so useless. Not only could she not save her daughter, but she had also brought him to this state. Scarlet was laughing so hard she was almost in tears. Aurora pointed a trembling finger at her. You're crazy, you madwoman. You did all this just because you hate me, right? To get Ethan. Now he's about to die. Why are you so happy? Get him. Scarlet looked at the man lying in a pool of blood with contempt. Aurora, you're hilarious. Still so naive at a time like this. No wonder even a man like Ethan fell for you. Did you think I did all this just to get him? Ha 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 ha. Did you think I've always been deeply in love with him, and because you stole my husband, my family, and my love, I wanted revenge? Ha 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 ha. That's too funny. Confused, Aurora asked, why are you laughing then? Isn't that it? If not, why did you do all this? Why? Scarlet walked closer, pinching her tear-stained face. Because it makes me happy. I just can't stand to see a lowly woman like you doing well. What? Aurora looked at Scarlet's crazed, laughing face in disbelief. She suddenly felt incredibly foolish, incredibly ridiculous. Scarlet was right. She was a lowly woman. If it weren't for her stupidity and lack of trust, neither Ethan nor Momo would be in this situation. Aurora knelt down, her pale fingers tracing Ethan's lips. His face was bloodless, his body covered in red, and his chest bore the wound she had cruelly inflicted. Her heart ached and her head spun. Ethan, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. It was all me. As she spoke, her tears fell like rain. Looking back at Momo, she knelt in despair. She couldn't save her. She no longer believed Scarlett would let her go. Overwhelmed with emotion, Aurora finally collapsed, fainting on top of Ethan. Seeing her complete breakdown, Scarlett walked over triumphantly. The men around her also approached. "Miss Gable, what's next?" A vicious, terrifying light gleamed in Scarlett's eyes. "Might as well go all the way. Get rid of all three of them." The men exchanged glances, seeming to hesitate. "Is that a good idea? After all, it's murder. We should avoid it if we can." Scarlett sneered, pointing at Ethan. "I don't need to tell you who he is, do I? If you don't get rid of them completely, do you think he'll let you go when he recovers? Heh, don't say I didn't warn you. He got a very clear look at all your faces." A triumphant smile played on her red lips. Hearing her words, the men looked at each other, their eyes glinting with malice. Chapter 43. A turn of events Scarlett watched as the men walked over, the smile on her face growing wilder. But at her most triumphant moment, the door was suddenly kicked open with a loud bang. "Miss Scarlett Gable, the police heard what you just said." A handsome man in a sharp suit held up a recording pen and smiled at her, a cool, gentle smile. Scarlett's smile froze on her lips. She stared at the swarm of police officers who had just rushed in, and before she could react, she was struggling as they arrested her. The man walked over and helped Ethan up. Ethan forced his eyes open and saw him. "You're here, just in time," the man smiled. "You're quite bold to gamble on this. You said you woke up on the way here, why go through with this?" Ethan looked weakly at Aurora without speaking, a hint of sadness and pity in his eyes. He had known about her final sorrow and breakdown, but he had been struggling just to stay conscious and couldn't comfort her. "All for her?" the man asked, nodding toward Aurora. Ethan coughed lightly. "When I was taken from the crash site, I suspected it was Scarlett. And if it was her, how could she let Aurora go? If I had escaped, she would have been in even more danger. This stupid woman." "All right, enough talk. Let's get to the hospital. This woman looks like she's had quite a scare," the man said, gesturing toward Aurora and handing Ethan a first aid kit. Ethan quickly bandaged himself, then swept Aurora up into his arms and walked out. When Aurora woke up in the hospital, she stared at the white ceiling for a long time. It wasn't until the strong smell of disinfectant filled her nostrils that she realized where she was. "Ah," she exclaimed, sitting up. The last thing she remembered was Ethan covered in blood. "You're awake," a calm male voice said from the side. She turned her head and saw that there was another man in the room. "Who are you?" Aurora clutched the blanket, her eyes wary. Although the man looked refined and respectable, appearances could be deceiving. That crazy, vicious woman, Scarlett, was not bad-looking either. The man's lips curved into a faint smile. "I'm a friend of Ethan's. The police rescued you." "A friend of Ethan's?" Aurora repeated, then asked anxiously, "Where's my daughter and Ethan?" The man pointed to the wall. "Ethan is next door. As for your daughter, she was taken by the police. She's safe." Hearing that Momo was safe, Aurora let out a slow breath. She immediately got out of bed and, on unsteady legs, went to the next room to find Ethan. The man watched her go, a strange light in his eyes. She rushed into the room and saw Ethan lying on the bed with his eyes closed. Her heart sank. She walked to the bedside. His body seemed to be covered in tubes. The chaotic sight made her even more nervous. What's wrong with him? Why is he still unconscious? She asked the man who had followed her in. "What's wrong? Shouldn't you know he was stabbed?" the man said with a contemptuous smile. Aurora froze. Yes, she had stabbed him. She began hesitantly. Chapter 44. You die or he dies. The man walked indifferently to the head of the bed, a playful glint in his eyes. "The doctor said he probably won't make it, and even if he's lucky enough to survive, he probably won't wake up." Clang, Aurora felt a buzzing in her ears, a sharp pain in her head as if she had been hit with a heavy object. No, how could that be? She covered her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. How could it be? He was going to die. It must be because of her that he was dying, remembering how she had stabbed him, how she had so cruelly and decisively pulled the knife out. She wished at that moment that it was her lying there, not him. She hadn't trusted him, she had wronged him, and she had hurt him so heartlessly. Watching her cry so sorrowfully, the man suddenly said, out of the blue, "I have something else to attend to. You watch over him for now." With that, he walked out. At the door, he looked down at his phone with a strange expression. A video was playing, a woman furtively standing at the hospital entrance, then sneaking in. Aurora sat by the bed, staring at Ethan, her fingers tracing his face, reluctant to let go. Soon, her lips replaced her fingers, unconsciously. She kissed his face gently. She wasn't sure if it was her imagination, but she felt his lips begin to warm. She lifted her head, about to investigate, when the door was suddenly pushed open. Startled, she turned to see Scarlett, a cold smile on her face as she closed the door behind her. "You?" Aurora jumped to her feet in shock. Scarlett laughed as she walked over. "Heth, what, Aurora?" Surprised I was able to get away. "The police didn't arrest you?" Aurora stood protectively in front of Ethan, her eyes wary. "HMPH," Scarlett sneered, then shoved her aside. "Ethan, you're really ruthless, getting my mom locked up too." "If I hadn't been clever, I wouldn't have gotten out." Already weak, Aurora fell to the floor. Seeing Scarlett heading for Ethan, she quickly got up to pull her back. Scarlett saw her move and sneered. "What, so reluctant to part with him now? Don't forget, he's lying here because of you, Aurora." Aurora's eyes darkened. "That's nonsense. If you hadn't threatened me with my daughter, how could I have?" "Hey ha ha ha, how could you have? Aurora, why deceive yourself? The one who didn't believe him was you. The one who ran away from the wedding and trampled on his pride was you. And the one who plunged a knife into his body was also you. Ha 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 ha. Admit it, Aurora. You're a bitch, a born bitch. It was his bad luck to have fallen for you." Aurora's face turned pale with anger. Worried for Ethan's safety, she kept herself between him and Scarlett, not relaxing for a moment. "How about I give you a chance?" Scarlett smiled wickedly. Aurora frowned. "What do you mean?" Scarlett took a knife from her bag, the same one Aurora had used before. She waved the gleaming blade at her. "Only one of you two can live. I need to see blood to quench my hatred. So Aurora, tell me, will it be you who dies or him?" Chapter 45. The one who protects me. Aurora gritted her teeth, her eyes fixed on the knife in Scarlett's hand, but she was powerless. The next second, her tear-filled eyes shone brightly, and she resolutely shielded Ethan's body with her own. "I'll die. You are not to harm Ethan." She had made a mistake once, had hurt him deeply once. There would not be a second time if she could. She would rather die herself to protect the one she loved. Scarlett's face twisted with anger. "Aurora, are you really willing to die for him? When did you become so noble? You don't care about your child anymore. Actually, even if I don't do anything today, he probably won't live much longer looking like this. Don't you think it's not worth it?" Aurora looked at her bravely. "Scarlett, you can stop with that act. Momo is safe now. And if I saved my own life by letting Momo's father die, she wouldn't forgive me for being so selfish when she grows up." She turned to look at the unconscious Ethan and said firmly, "No matter how long he has left, I am willing to give my all to let him live even one more day." "Fine, fine. In that case, I'll kill you first." Scarlett laughed maniacally as she raised the dagger and lunged. She had only given Aurora a choice to torment her further. She had never intended to let either of them go. Aurora watched the knife come toward her. Already weak, she had no chance against the frenzied Scarlett. She could only close her eyes in despair, waiting for the pain and death. A few seconds later, the expected pain did not come. Instead, Scarlett's surprised cry made her open her eyes. "Huh." Aurora stared in shock at the scene before her. Ethan, his face an icy mask, was staring at Scarlett, whose hand holding the knife was gripped so tightly she couldn't move. "Ethan, you." Aurora looked at the perfectly fine Ethan in amazement. He turned his head and gave her a reassuring look. That one look was enough to save her. She looked at her man, her god. Just him standing there was enough to put her heart at ease. She looked at his back, feeling an inexplicable sense of security and contentment. But thinking of what she had done before, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. Ethan looked at Scarlett and said faintly, "You're not bad to be able to escape." As soon as he finished speaking, the man from before walked in with a group of police officers. He looked at Scarlett with a cool expression, as if he had been waiting for her all along. The madness on Scarlett's face was undeniable. "Ethan Smith, you destroyed everything I had. You even sent my mother to prison. I won't let you go." Although she screamed and yelled, all she had left was her madness. Ethan watched indifferently as the police, who had arrived just in time, arrested her again. This time, she probably wouldn't be able to escape. He turned his head and saw a certain woman staring at him with a mix of pity and terror. He couldn't help but smile. "What? Where's the person who just said she would die for me, who would protect me?" With that, he reached out and gently tapped her on the nose. The tap brought her back to her senses, and she rushed forward in joyful surprise. "You're okay? They said you were dying." Chapter 46. Don't run away this time. Ethan looked at the star-like sparkle in Aurora's eyes, and his heart warmed. The heart that had been shattered by her running away from the wedding suddenly felt healed. He dotingly wrapped his arm around her. "Yes, I almost died, and it was all thanks to you." Because his chin was resting on top of her head, she couldn't see his expression. Hearing the words, "thanks to you," she immediately felt a pang of guilt and was about to confess her mistake. But before she could speak, he held her head firmly in his embrace. As if he knew what she was about to say, he said tenderly, "Forget it. Luckily, you were clumsy enough to stab me in the wrong place, otherwise I might not have survived." Aurora lowered her head, but at this moment, she had no intention of arguing. Seeing how obedient she was, Ethan smiled with satisfaction. "Well, if we count the days, it's about time we had another wedding. You really don't blame me. You still want to marry me?" Aurora looked at him with the frightened expression of a small deer. Ethan shook his head helplessly and stroked her head. "Idiot, silly girl, don't you want to marry me? Or are you planning to run away again?" Aurora shook her head frantically, then looked at him with pleading eyes. "But it was because of me that you got into the car accident. And in that situation, I still stabbed you," she said, so ashamed she was about to cry. A secret smile played on Ethan's lips, but he deliberately put on a straight face. "Oh, so you know you wronged me now?" Aurora nodded like a woodpecker. "I know I was wrong, I was stupid, I was foolish for falling for Scarlett's trick." Ethan grinned. This silly woman still had some hope. At least she was being sincere in her apology now. Just as she looked up, she caught his quickly disappearing smile. She blinked and suddenly felt like she had been tricked again. Her mind raced and she immediately lunged at him, demanding, "Wait a minute, Ethan. How come you're not surprised at all to be awake? And the police arrived so quickly. Something's not right. You better tell me the truth. Were you awake all along?" Ethan laughed awkwardly, scratching his head, his eyes darting around. It seemed this woman had indeed become much smarter after this incident. "Heh. Well, Aurora." Seeing his guilty expression, Aurora immediately knew what was going on. She swung her hand, pouncing on him and scratching him. Ethan resignedly took the beating for a while, a scratch even appearing on his face. Finally, unable to take it anymore, he blocked her with his hands, yelling for help. All right, that's enough, stop messing around." Aurora suddenly let out a shy cry. Ethan looked down and saw that his hand, which he had used to block her, was now covering her soft chest. Annoyed, she was about to push his hand away, but she saw the corner of his mouth curve up, and her chest was immediately kneaded heavily. Then came a rain of light kisses, falling from the sky. Aurora tilted her head back, and before closing her eyes, she saw the sunset by the bed, beautiful like a painting. At this moment, outside the hospital room, Leo smacked his little lips and asked Momo, "Sister, why won't you let me in? I'm worried about Daddy." Momo, wise beyond her years, rolled her eyes. "Not now, let's go play somewhere else. Daddy is disciplining Mommy." Leo tilted his head. "Why is Daddy disciplining Mommy?" Momo thought for a moment, then blinked her big eyes and said, "Probably because Mommy likes it when Daddy disciplines her. Who knows with grown-up stuff." Chapter 47. Epilogue. Won the truth of the past on the weekend. With no work to do, Ethan was in a great mood and took Aurora out for a date. "We're an old married couple. Why are we still going on dates? What about the kids?" Aurora pouted, reluctantly strolling down the street, but her mind was filled with images of Momo and Leo. She wondered if the two little ones were fighting, if they were eating properly, if the nanny at home could handle them. She wondered. Ethan, his face a mixture of annoyance and jealousy, lightly tapped her on the head, interrupting her train of thought. "Relax, I hired 3 extra nannies just for this. Isn't that enough to look after 2 little ones?" Aurora complained with a worried expression. "You idiot, what do you know? Momo and Leo don't listen to the nannies. I'm the only one who can manage them. Besides, the people you hired are just doing it for the money. They won't really care about the children." Ethan's brow furrowed so tightly he could have crushed a fly. Enough. You're always fussing over the 2 kids. Don't you get tired of it?" Aurora looked at the man who was acting like a child and said with amusement, "What, are you jealous of your own kids?" "Who's jealous?" he said in a huff. Aurora silently rolled her eyes. With that reaction, how could he say he wasn't jealous? But seeing how much he cared about her, she secretly smiled to herself. She leaned over and kissed his sulking face. But she was immediately pulled into a tight embrace, and in front of everyone, Ethan deepened the kiss. Aurora's face flushed so red it could have bled. She playfully punched his chest a few times, but was soon kissed until she was dizzy. After they had kissed their fill, they sat down on a bench. Aurora looked up and saw that the bar where she had first met Ethan was not far away. "I heard that place has a new owner," she said, pointing to the bar. Ethan's expression was a little dark. "Oh, the original owner was Scarlett's biological father. He was involved in what happened to your father, so they all went to prison." Aurora covered her mouth in surprise. "So, that means the new owner is you." Ethan nodded but said nothing. Looking at his expression, Aurora suddenly remembered what had happened a few years ago and said with a hint of sadness, "Actually, back then, the day I found out I was pregnant with Momo, I saw you go to see Scarlett." When, Ethan frowned. Aurora sighed and gave a bitter smile. "That day, after Scarlett and her mother kicked me out of the house, I saw you go to find Scarlett just as my stomach started to hurt. I was so sad then, I really felt like I had lost the whole world. If I hadn't known I was pregnant with Momo at that time, I probably wouldn't have survived." Ethan's eyes froze. "Kicked you out of the house? Was your going to the bar back then also related to Scarlett?" Aurora looked at him and nodded. "Back then, my stepmother lied to me and said Scarlett had a terminal illness, so I had to work desperately to earn money for her treatment. Almost all the money I got from you, I gave to them. But I never thought that the sister I genuinely wanted to treat well would treat me like that. Heck, speaking of which, I was really foolish." Hearing this, Ethan hugged her tightly, his heart aching. He couldn't help but think of the humiliating things he had said to her, how he had almost killed his own daughter. Thinking of the adorable Momo, a chill went down his spine. Luckily, Aurora had saved the child back then, otherwise he would probably never have been as happy as he was now. Feeling his arms tighten around her, Aurora's heart was suddenly filled with the passage of time and sweet years. No matter what they had been through, what had happened, it was all in the past now. They were finally happy. Chapter 48, Epilogue 2, The Ex-Wife's End. "Let me out, you bastards. Why are you arresting me instead of that little bitch and that bastard Ethan Smith?" In the police station, a woman's shrill shouts made all the officers frown. Scarlett was, by all accounts, a beautiful woman, but now, in everyone's eyes, she was just a madwoman. Ethan had just reached the entrance when he heard the shrewish yelling from inside. A cold, indifferent smile touched his lips as he stepped in. The police, of course, all recognized him, so no one stopped him. He walked straight to Scarlett's cell, and from behind the iron bars, watched her madness with a detached expression. When Scarlett saw him, she lunged at the bars like a madwoman, banging her head against them as she screamed, "Ethan Smith, you bastard, let me out. What right do you have to lock me up? What right? Is there no law anymore? You just rely on your money, your dirty money. You framed me. Ethan Smith, I'm not done with you. You better not let me out, because if I get out, I won't let you go." As she yelled, she banged her head until it was bleeding, the smell of blood filling the air. Ethan frowned slightly, disgusted by her blood, her filthy blood. "Scarlett, look at yourself now. You're truly disgusting. You are my ex-wife, after all. I originally came to pity you, but it seems you're having quite a time here." Faced with his sarcasm, Scarlett burst into a crazed laugh. "Ha ha ha ha, ex-wife. Ethan, ask yourself, in all these years, have you ever really treated me as your wife? No matter how I messed around outside, how I slept with other men, how I spent money, you never cared. Actually, from the moment you married me, you never once cared about me, never tried to love me, Ethan, you hypocritical liar. You only married me because you looked down on Aurora's background. You married me, the woman you thought was so pure. Ha 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 ha. Actually, you're just a hypocritical villain." Her shouts were a mix of madness and bitterness. She stared at him, her face streaked with blood and tears. Back then, she had tried to love him. It was a lie to say she wasn't moved by such an outstanding man. But even after they were married, so what? She thought she had finally stolen Aurora's man, only to find it was an empty shell. His gentleness, his tolerance, it was all a lie. Nothing was more accurate than a woman's intuition. He had never had her in his heart. He had never tried to love her, to understand her. So she went wild outside. She deliberately let him know she was sleeping with other men. But he just stopped touching her, as if he found her dirty, but he was never hurt, never sad. Liar, where was his heart? She was in despair. She could never capture this man's heart. And then she came back. Aurora. From the moment Aurora reappeared, she knew that his heart had finally shown itself. He would get angry, he would be furious, he would be jealous, he would even be sad. But it was all because of Aurora. It was then that she finally understood. It wasn't that he didn't have a heart, that he couldn't love. It was that he had fallen in love with Aurora long ago and had always loved her. Ethan listened silently to her venting. He knew that what she said was true. Perhaps, if it weren't for her interference and deceit back then, his and Aurora's ending would have been different. Perhaps he would have realized sooner that he was so deeply in love with this woman. Regardless, everything was fated. Fortunately, they were together now. Then, ignoring her crazed screams, he turned and left. This would probably be the last time he would ever see his so-called ex-wife. Watching him leave, Scarlett finally quieted down. An image of Leo appeared in her mind. She finally knelt down and cried with regret. She suddenly realized that the end of all her madness was that she might never see her own son again. Chapter 49, Epilogue 3, A Wedding Trip. What? A trip? Aurora looked in surprise at the bright, sunny face of Ethan before her. Why are we suddenly going on a trip? She couldn't help but twitch her lips. For some reason, she felt that this man was becoming more and more lively, more and more unpredictable. Ethan pouted. What, you don't want to go? Aurora finally couldn't help but roll her eyes dramatically. Yes, I don't want to go. You have to go with that. He immediately instructed the nanny to start packing. Aurora looked at the suddenly forceful man, at a loss, wondering what had gotten into him now. Just as she was about to argue, he half dragged, half pulled her out the door. Hey, even if we're going on a trip, we have to finish packing first, she said, making a final struggle. He pushed her into the car, closed the door, and said faintly, Before we go on the trip, we're going to one place first. Where? Hey, stop the car, I have to go to the bathroom. Where are we going? Ethan drove seriously, completely ignoring the chattering woman beside him. Helpless, Aurora finally gave up struggling and resisting. She looked out at the scenery in boredom, but the more she looked, the more she felt something was wrong. This seemed to be the road to the cemetery. She turned and looked at Ethan with a complicated expression. When they arrived at the cemetery, they got out of the car. Ethan held her hand and led her to a gravestone. Her lips trembled slightly. Ethan had already begun to speak slowly. I'm sorry I didn't meet Aurora sooner. I always think that if I had met her earlier, maybe I could have protected her better. And I should have trusted her more back then. Tears in her eyes, Aurora shook her head and said to her father's gravestone, Dad, I'm very happy. He's very good to me, he really is. Ethan suddenly grabbed her hand and continued, We're going on a trip to a place with beautiful scenery. I think that by traveling the world, we can find the most beautiful place. And then we'll have another wedding. A wedding? She asked, turning to look at him in surprise. His gaze was so firm and clear that her heart stirred. So the so-called trip was for this. 3 months later, in a village in England, the ground was covered in gold, the distant sky was shrouded in light, and nearby, there was a long, quiet stretch of deserted land. Aurora looked at the man kneeling before her. He was so handsome. His profile, illuminated by the sunset, had a beauty that seemed to transcend time. But could such a wonderful man really be her husband from now on? Ethan looked up at her beautiful, tear-filled eyes and smiled faintly. Will you marry me? Aurora nodded. The next second, she was pulled into his warm embrace. She turned her head. The distant light of the sky, the pounding and stirring in her heart, it was all so real, so unforgettable. They were finally married. After so many years, they were finally truly together. Her tears fell onto his chest, and in the moment they fell, they seemed to reflect the light of years and time. They called each other's names until the joy reached its peak. Aurora opened her slightly hazy eyes and felt that in that moment, the world had lost its color. I would be willing to die now, she couldn't help but murmur. Ethan couldn't help but laugh, and he mumbled, Idiot, Chapter 50. Epilogue 4 time is carved early in the morning. Aurora was in a great mood, humming a song. Before leaving, Ethan said with disdain, It's just Mother's Day. Do you have to be so happy? She smiled triumphantly. HMPH, what do you know? Last Mother's Day, I received a portrait of me that Momo drew herself. As she spoke, her face was already filled with sweetness. Thinking of the cute, not-so-realistic drawing, her heart felt as if it had been filled with honey. Ethan snorted, a sour feeling in his heart, and turned to leave. After finishing breakfast, Momo came bouncing over, gave her mother a sweet kiss, and said, "Mommy, I love you. Happy Mother's Day." Aurora replied cheerfully, "Thank you, my big baby. Mommy loves you too." She then watched the little one with a smile, but Momo's little eyes darted around mischievously. "Today, I have a very special gift for you, Mommy." "What did you just call me?" Aurora covered her mouth, looking at Leo in disbelief. Leo lowered his head shyly. Momo took his hand as if to encourage him. He looked up again. "Mommy, Auntie, will you be my mommy?" Tears fell from Aurora's eyes like broken pearls. She excitedly hugged his small body. "Yes, of course, I will. From now on, Auntie will be your mommy, not far away." Ethan stood at the door. He didn't know how long he had been standing there. Seeing Leo and Aurora hugging, a brilliant light flashed in his eyes. Momo triumphantly shouted to her, "Mommy, this is my gift. Do you like it?" Aurora let go of Leo, and with tear-filled eyes, she looked at her sensible daughter's cute face. Crying and laughing, she said, "I love it, I love it. Of course I do. This is the best Mother's Day gift I could have imagined." "What about a Father's Day gift?" a sudden voice asked. Aurora and the two kids looked over and saw a certain someone standing at the door, looking dazed and a little jealous. Seeing their dad actually asking for a gift, the two kids exchanged mischievous, guilty smiles. Aurora helplessly slapped his outstretched hand and laughed. "You idiot, today is Mother's Day. Of course there's no Father's Day gift." "Oh." A super reluctant sound. The two kids couldn't hold it in any longer and burst out laughing. Seeing the man whose persona had completely collapsed, Aurora was at a loss for whether to laugh or cry. But this version of Ethan was really cute. She walked over and smiled slightly. Here's a Father's Day gift for you." With that, she placed his hand on her stomach. He looked up blankly, his eyes filled with confusion. Aurora looked down sweetly at the two, equally curious kids. "This gift is for you to share with Daddy. Our family is going to have a new little member." With that one sentence, the two kids were stunned. Ethan's eyes, however, instantly lit up with a dazzling light. He gently hugged Aurora and the two kids and said softly, "Thank you, honey. This is my best Father's Day gift, too." Outside the window, sunlight streamed in, dazzling and warm. Time was stretched and the years were carved.